pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I'd like to call this evening's meeting to order. It's September 25th, 2019. This is a regular Planning Commission meeting for the first half, or for the first portion of our meeting, and then we're going to, of course, adjourn the meeting and get into a work session continuing on the tree ordinance. Is everyone here this evening here for the plat discussion, or is anybody here for another topic this evening? All for the plat discussion? Okay. So let me, because it's a regular meeting with attendance from the public, let me read the chairman's script for that. This is a regular meeting of the City of Milton Planning Commission. I'm Paul Moore, chairperson. This is a 7-member commission appointed by the City of Milton Mayor and City Council, created for the purpose of holding public hearings and making recommendations on rezonings, use permits, concurrent variance applications, comprehensive land use plan, plan map, and other related plans, amendments to the zoning ordinance. I'd like to introduce the members of our commission this evening. To my left is Fred Edwards, Samit Shah, Kurt Nolte, I'm Paul Moore, Mark Bittner, and Ron Gilbert are all in attendance this evening. The petitions will be heard in the sequence listed on the posted agenda. I'd like to acquaint you with some of the rules and procedures conducting this meeting. The applicant and all those speaking in support of an application will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present the petition. The applicant may choose to save some of the time for rebuttal following the presentation by the opposition. The opposition will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present its position. And if time remains, the opposition will be allowed to rebut. Since the burden of proof is upon the applicant will be allowed to make closing remarks provided time remains within the allotted time. The staff of the Community Development Department will be keeping track of the time, and I will inform you periodically of the remaining time for your presentation. Each speaker must fill out a speaker card before speaking and leave it with a staff member of the Community Development Department. All speakers will identify themselves by name, address, and organization, if applicable, before beginning their presentation. When an opponent of a rezoning action has made within 2 years immediately preceding the filing of a rezoning action being opposed, campaign contributions aggregating $250 or more to a local government official of the local government which will consider the application, it shall be the duty of the opponent to file a disclosure with the governing authority and of the respective local government at least 5 days prior to the Planning Commission meeting. A violation of the relevant state statute constitutes a misdemeanor. Therefore, if you have contributed $250 or more to a council member and you have not filed the disclosure prior to the Planning Commission meeting, the city attorney strongly suggests that you have someone else speak on your point of view. Each application has been properly filed with the Department of Community Development. Signs have been posted on each site. The matter has been advertised, and the notices have been mailed to property owners affected by this zoning as required by the Milton Zoning Ordinance. The Planning Commission's recommendation will be forwarded to the City of Milton Mayor and City Council for final disposition. The Mayor and City Council hearing will be held approximately 3.5 weeks from this hearing on the third Monday of each month at 6 p.m. in these council chambers. The Community Development Department has reviewed each application in conjunction with various agencies and departments, both internal and external to the city. Staff's recommendations, findings, and conclusions are here before us in written form, which has been made available to all petitioners and to the public. Demonstrations of any sort in the chamber are prohibited, so please refrain from any applause, dialogue with the person speaking, or outbursts. Please turn off all cell phones or place them on silent. All remarks will be addressed by the Planning Commission. Please show the same respect to the person speaking that you will expect to receive yourself. In addition, the applicant shall not submit material to the Planning Commission during the meeting unless requested to do so by the Commission. All material that you wish to be received by the Commission in consideration of your application should be submitted to the staff of the Community Development Department to be included in the normal distribution of packages to the Commission. Finally, to the applicant, if your petition is deferred in accordance with the Milton Zoning Ordinance, you are required to update or obtain a new sign for reposting. Failure to update or repost will result in further delay, and there are no exceptions. So at this point, is there anyone here this evening who would like to make a public comment on anything that is not on our agenda?
So you need to, if you'd like to read the preliminary plat.
I will.
Okay.
After that, so before we do the preliminary plat, we'll do public comment. So anything on the agenda this evening, I'm sorry, would you like to speak on anything that is not on our agenda this evening? If not, we'll close public comment. Okay, hearing none, I will close public comment. So because we're hearing a preliminary plat this evening, there is one more item I need to read for the consumption of the community. The Planning Commission is tasked by the city's subdivision ordinance to conduct a public hearing on proposed preliminary plats that have been found to be complete by the Community Development Department. At the conclusion of the public hearing, the Planning Commission is required to review the proposed preliminary plat and provide comments and make recommendations regarding the plat to the Community Development Director. The Planning Commission does not approve or reject the proposed preliminary plat, but merely provides comments or recommendations based on the public hearing and the Planning Commission's review of the proposed preliminary plat. So having read that, we have one more point of order, Robin, before we move to the plat discussion, and that is the approval of the action minutes from the July 24th Planning Commission meeting. Has everybody had a chance to read them? They were shared with us by Robin electronically this week. Any additions or changes, Fred?
Under preliminary plat, the last line says April 2019 Planning Commission to add one additional lot and was 14.3 acre.
I'm sorry.
Is there
What
supposed to be
about
some? Yeah.
That was just a description that it was a revision of that.
Of the total?
Right, so when they came in earlier in the year in 2019, this was just a description saying that the preliminary plat, that same plat was heard at the April meeting to add one additional lot and was 14.3.
Acres total. 12 lots on 17.2.
Or we can just delete any reference to it,
Okay.
because
Or would
the
you
new
rather-
one was 12 lots on 17.2, so I got it mixed up, so.
Would you rather?
I mean, that was just a description of what was
Was it?
presented.
Yeah, but just the way it read, sounds like that additional lot was 14.3 acres.
It does. The original subdivision that was approved the first time at Planning Commission was a 14.3 acre site. And now we updated it. They added a few acres, so now it's a 17.2 for 12 lots.
Yeah, went from 11 to 12 lots.
Yeah,
Okay.
we could probably clear.
So if that's clear enough for everybody, we could make a motion to adopt these. If you'd rather take the opportunity to correct that, so it
Well,
is more.
it's just worded weirdly, I guess, not clearly, but whatever you all want to do.
We could add the word previously in there and was previously 14.3 acres.
Okay.
if
That's fine.
And,
Does that make more clear?
Have to have
Fred, why
one.
don't you, if you want to make
Make
a
a
motion
motion.
and just include that in your motion, Fred?
Right. That I approve the meeting of Wednesday, July 24th, with the addition of the correction, that being 17 acres.
Well, no.
The correction is going to be to add one additional lot and was previously 14.3.
That was previously
Yeah.
14.3.
We're just adding the word previously.
Right.
That makes it make more sense. Okay, we've had a motion. Second by Ron. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That's unanimous. Today's the
Just go. I told them that you would present.
Okay. And then, Robin, do the circumstances still remain the same for the that we had regarding the advertising of the
Right.
plat that we're hearing?
Right, but I did talk to some of the neighbors, and since they're here, we would go ahead and present what they were proposing, but there won't be you would just vote to defer it.
Okay.
Okay, so even though we're going to defer, I'm going to go ahead and present the development, and that way we can kind of open it up for comments and feedback after the presentation.
Just to make sure they understand. So that because because of the change in the advertising, it's going to require another period of time for it to be advertised correctly. So there'll be another hearing, just like this one, on the plat.
It's going to be October 23rd.
So on October 23rd. So your choice, obviously, is to make comment this evening because you're here, and we look forward to hearing those comments from you. If you so choose to come back the next month, you're welcome to do that as well. If you're unable to do that, your comments from this evening will be in the record, and we'll not make any formal motions or recommendations on the plat until next month. There'll be a motion for deferral this evening to accommodate that plan for next month. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, so tonight we're talking about the Grove at Sweet Apple proposed development. It's off of Ebenezer Road in the southwest corner of the city near Sweet Apple Road. So you can see it here. This is the 11-acre piece as it exists currently. The owner/developer is Brightwater Homes. It's 11.11 acre tract that's currently undeveloped, and the developer is proposing 9 single-family lots to yield a density of 0.81 units per acre, and the current zoning is AG1. So here's the plan. It's kind of just to orient you. The north is to the right, so we're shifted where this is Ebenezer here to your left. And I'll kind of zoom in a little bit so you can see it a little better. So the development comes in here, the entrance off of Ebenezer, and then we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lots, and they're all of these lots except for this rear lot are around an acre, just at an acre, or just above. So you come in here with 24-inch pavement, no curb and gutter is proposed, just a nice rural section road, where it has a hammerhead at the end, and then at the end there's a mail kiosk with a connection to their trail easement that they have at the adjacent development. So it'll be an extension of the trail loop that was already there around this existing pond. And so this back lot here does continue up towards the rest of the land that they currently have adjacent to the conservation easement. So that's just a quick overview of it. Staff has reviewed this, and it does meet all of our codes and requirements. And so I'll just open it now for any comments or feedback.
From the public or from the?
From the public, or what, yeah.
Great. We welcome you to the podium if you so choose this evening.
Or we can turn on this mic.
Yeah. Does
Well,
it, if you want to speak, if you don't want to speak, you don't have to. Is there anybody who wanted to speak on the item, or you're just here to learn? Okay. If you want to,
If you'd like to approach the mic.
yeah.
My name is Jim Gibson. I'm just curious. I'm assuming that it's,
Mr. Gibson, would you just say your address for the record too, please, before you?
11395 Bowen Road in Roswell.
Thank you.
I'm assuming that this is being, going to be developed into single family.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Do we know a price point of those?
They're probably going to be pretty comparable to their existing. They have a development just to the west, down Ebenezer. So it's the same developer, Brightwater, and they're the builder. So they're just adding another, it's basically just another phase, but they're calling it a different, it's, what is it called? The
Grove.
The Grove at
Sweet
Sweet
Apple.
Apple. I was going to say Sweetwater. So it's going to be very similar to the homes that are already being built to the west. Yeah,
That answered my question. Thank you.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else this evening care to comment? Okay.
So like Chairman Moore said, we'll have this back at our next meeting on October 23rd with the appropriate advertising. So you're more than welcome to come back if you have comments or questions. The developer will be here at that meeting as well, so.
And Robin, there was an email that came that you circulated to us as well. Will that go into the record at the next meeting?
Right, so Mr. and Mrs. Meredith will receive another notice. So if they can come to the next one, they can do that as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
I apologize for a brief hearing this evening without the benefit of the developer here. I'm not sure that there's really much purpose for our additional discussion this evening. So unfortunately, that probably means we ask you to come out again next month. So we encourage you to come. We look forward to your input. We really want the citizens to be involved in decisions like this. As was represented by staff, it does meet staff's requirements. For the most part, it's an acceptable proposal, but I'm convinced, as it typically is the case, that the Planning Commission will have a variety of questions for the developer to make sure it's in keeping with the expectations we've got of Milton and the surrounding area where you guys are living. So thank you for coming this evening.
Copies of that plan available at all? I mean, like online or anything?
They are available online.
Yeah, so
They
this-
can go to this evening's.
Right, so if you go to the calendar today, you can access it on our website, on the calendar, and then click on the packet for this meeting. And if you'd like to have a hard copy, a smaller hard copy, I can get that for y'all if you want me to. Okay, well, let me do that for you. Let me finish this meeting, and then once we dismiss, then I'll go and get that for you. Okay?
Okay, so
We need a motion.
the case, I would entertain a motion.
Yeah.
We've completed this evening's agenda for the formal Planning Commission meeting. I'd like a motion to adjourn. Right, is there a second? Motion.
Do we have
We
to
haven't deferred it. Correct, thanks, Mark. So I need a motion for deferral.
deferral?
I make a motion to defer the preliminary plat for the Grove at Sweet Apple to the October 2019 Planning Commission meeting.
Is there a second?
Second it.
Great, thanks, Mark. Any comments? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, it's deferred to next month. All right, now that completes our, great, thank you. Is there a second? Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear who made the motion, the first.
Samit made the motion to
Okay.
adjourn, seconded by Kurt.
Okay, great.
And all those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, so we're adjourned. All right, so now we're going to step into a work session that will, for the purposes of reviewing our ongoing review of the tree ordinance. Sandra, are you leading the discussion this evening?
Yes, so I will start and then I will give it to Sandra.
Great.
Chair, should we start?
Give me 1 second to sort of reorganize myself here.
We are giving you too many papers, right?
Why we're trying to save trees, but we're killing trees.
How many trees we have already cut?
Yes, you did. I noticed that. Thank you very much for doing that.
Okay, this-
Okay, everybody ready? So there is no formal address to open the meeting other than to just begin the work session. So thank you all for being here to lead the discussion this evening.
So good evening, Planning Commission members. I'm Parag Agarwal, City's Community Development Director. I also have with me our City Arborist, Sandra Doet, and the Plan Review Manager, Melissa Brennan. You all know Robin, so Robin is also there. So today we are here in front of you to present our work on the city's tree preservation ordinance, the draft version. As you know, we had a great conversation last month also, and we have taken all your feedback and we have further updated the tree preservation ordinance. So today you have a set of 3 documents in front of you. The first document is the master document, which we are still working on. So this document was given to us after the first Planning Commission meeting. It was prepared by the acting chair, Ron Gilbert, talking about all the comments which the Planning Commission members had in the first commission meeting. And we are still using this document as a master document. The second document which you have is the red line version. The red line version is a document which has 2 types of edits. The one edit are simply the red marks. And the second type of edits, you will see the red marks with yellow highlights. So the red marks are the ones which we discussed last time. They have been added. And the yellow marks are the ones, yellow highlights are the ones which we discussed in the last planning commission and have been updated for this planning commission meeting. So the yellow highlights are the things which are new, which you did not see in the last planning commission meeting. And the third document is basically the clean version of all the red, yellow, everything sort of a thing. The yellow is still in there. But anyways, this is sort of a clean version. If we all get lost, what are we looking at? So we can always go back to this document.
Great.
The last thing which I will say is we gave this red line version to you last Thursday or Friday. After that, we have done some more work in it. Especially the comment which Ron basically mentioned, how we can separate the tree manual from the tree preservation ordinance. So we have done some more work in it, which is not part of your packet right now. But once we are having this discussion, we can just update you on the language which we are planning to put in, and we can further discuss it.
Okay. So I had the opportunity at the council meeting earlier this week to have a quick conversation with Robin and Sandra. It was primarily about how are we going to address actually my question, I think, first was, where do we stand on the second document? And it made sense when she was explaining to me the fact that it's hard for you guys to go forward on that until we really completed this document, so I totally embrace that. I guess the question is either back to you or actually any one of the three of you. How do you see the process going forward once we've gotten to what we think is going to, and Parag made a very bold commitment the other night to propose this was going to be available for the October mayor and council meeting.
I said hoping.
Sorry. And we hope we can accommodate that. But short of that, what is the process going to look like? Will the mayor and council be vetting it and or adopting this document before we have the user manual completed? Or will that ultimately be, because originally you had talked about a January timeline
Yes.
for them. Was the January timeline with it in mind that it would be the collective document being presented at that point?
So, and I want to get your feedback, but our general thought as of now is, after we get your feedback on this tree preservation ordinance, we will update the manual. Again, if there are only one or two sections in which we are saying, look at the manual. So we will be just updating that specific language in the manual for January deadline. It will not be complete rewrite or anything, but it will be, again, any places we are cross-referencing this document with the manual, we will go ahead and incorporate or change that part of the manual.
Okay.
But Sandra will like to, again, look at the entire manual and see what changes can be made, but that will not happen before January.
Okay. And then as the manual's being developed, it will come before the Planning Commission for review and adoption prior to going to the mayor and
Same
council.
process, and we can work on the process, whatever you will say.
Great. We look forward, and we're happy to make each one of our, I'll speak for the commission, but I think as we can do our best to expedite the process for you, we're happy to make each one of our Planning Commission meetings, the second half of it, in the coming months that we've got, a work session as well, to be able to accommodate that process.
Yeah, there's one more layer in between. So I'm trying to put this document, if the Planning Commission is comfortable, we are trying to put this document in front of the City Council in the October work session. But there's one more layer. So there was a stakeholders committee put in place for the tree preservation ordinance. So when the stakeholders committee approved the draft version, what I promised them, if there will be changes, we will again just show it to them. We will again present it to them because they did work on this document for 5 months. Yep. So if once the Planning Commission reviews it and they are comfortable with this, I will like to again, we can just email it to the stakeholders committee, or if they would like to again meet and see the changes that have been made. So that part is still there.
Okay.
I'm not hoping that there will be any more changes, but still they should get a chance to at least look at what
That's completely appropriate.
Yeah.
Yeah, I support that. Great.
Mm-hmm. you want to go forward?
Sure. Okay. So hopefully, I know this is a lot to throw at you guys, and I appreciate you taking the time to look at it. I hope that the format that I gave to you made a little bit of sense. I tried to clarify the changes being made as clearly as I could. I know when you're working with documents and you're in several versions, it just starts becoming one big blob. At least that's what it does to me. I don't know how it does to everybody else, but so I struggle with it sometimes when you have so many different red line versions and you go through it. And I know sometimes I look at it so much that I miss some stuff. So feel free to let me know if you see something that I missed or didn't cover. But I thought maybe we could just kind of go through, once again, as Parag said, the original list of recommendations after the first work session. I kind of went through there and made notations in green as kind of to guide you as to what I did in those sections. So if that's okay with the Planning Commission, we'll just go through that list kind of like we did last time. Does that work for everybody?
Sure.
Okay. So
Just
we'll
confirm,
kind
you're
of,
starting with our original, the Planning Commission review document, or are you going right into the?
well, I think what you might want to have the recommendation document
Yep,
and the red line version will kind
Yeah.
of go back and forth.
all right,
We'll kind of look at it on the recommendation list and then look at it in the red line.
okay.
Does that make sense?
We also have the page number so that we can.
Yeah, I tried to put the page numbers on there. I did realize,
It made sense most of the time,
yeah.
most of the time.
Yeah, I know. And then I realized that after I sent it to you that I may have left some page numbers off. So I will try to tell you the page numbers
Okay.
when they're not available.
The red line version compared to the notes with your, in green?
Yeah. So we'll use the red line version because you'll see that most of the section numbers that were referenced on the recommendation kind of coincide with the red line version.
No, because only one other thing is, obviously, we've got the green comments too, but in just going through the red line version, I also saw other things that, I think we just need to clean up. And again, it's more of the cleanup thing, kind of like what we talked about. I didn't get to come the last time, but the previous time, that consistency, how we've got words defined and how they need to be actually.
Yeah, and some of that we found after we sent this out. So, I do plan to go through several reviews to make sure it is cleaned up and to make sure it is consistent in the language. So I know it may not be 100% perfect right now, but I just wanted to at least go through the changes that were recommended and show you what was done and see if you're happy with the changes or if we need to look at it further.
Okay.
So, all right, let's start with the Section 2, Community Forest Vision and Goals. You had mentioned that you kind of wanted to see the forest vision and goals added back. So this is in reference to page 2 of the red line version. Well, it actually kind of starts on page 1 and page 2. So what I did was I did incorporate back the maintain no net loss, and I did that by adding a C under 2.2. And C says,
I'm sorry, you've actually lost me already, so.
I know this is really hard to follow. I apologize.
So what you added in C, in the yellow,
Yes.
is intended to replace what was 2.1 through 2.4?
2.3 and 2.4.
2.3 and 2.4.
Yes.
Okay.
So what it says is maintain no net loss of tree canopy cover below the 57% existing as of March 2017. The city will measure the tree canopy using the latest technology as needed to evaluate the effectiveness of this ordinance in achieving the city's tree canopy goals. So does anybody have any questions or comments about that?
Do you still intend to capture what was in 2.1 and 2.2, either in an opening, like a preamble to this, or will that reside somewhere else?
Well, I kind of thought that sections of the purpose and intent kind of did relay that, because you have under 2.1B, manage and utilize community trees for the economic, environmental, and social functions and benefits they provide, which is very similar to managing the community forest to continually improve quality and quantity of life. Or,
You know, from from an administrative standpoint, I'm glad to see that those things are there that way. But I think as we introduce the tree ordinance, there should be a preamble to that. And maybe it's something that's, you know, softer and more esoteric than when you get into, you know, 1 and 1.1 and 1.2, 1.2C, you know, A through C, whatever. I think you lose some of the sense of, it's like reading an introduction to a book. You want to be able to say, where are we going with this? I would just suggest maybe a consideration. I get the fact that these things are there now, and those words are what we were looking for being represented here. But I think you lose something if there's not some sort of a preamble to the document. Maybe it's just something that's even softer than this, because you do capture the words that we were asking for with what you're suggesting here. But just food for thought, not necessarily a requirement.
okay. All right. Moving on to section 3, administrator.
Before we move to section
Oh.
3, I have one question for you.
Okay.
This is a question I should have asked the first night, and I skipped over it, so my apologies. This is a somewhat belated question. But in what is now section 2.1C, we talk about this document providing a framework for accomplishing certain goals which are consistent with environmental conservation ordinances, plans, and other community conservation and environmental ordinances. What are we referring to there? This is broader context, and I just wanted to see what you see this fitting into.
Well, the environmental and conservation ordinances, I would assume it's talking about like the erosion control and stream buffer ordinances and the plans and policies that go with those. Because those are the ordinances that would cover environment.
Okay, thank you.
Just 1.1, real quick on section 1.1. So, you know, this is all called the tree canopy conservation ordinance, right? But then, in 1.1, it says this chapter shall be known as the tree conservation ordinance, not the tree canopy conservation.
Okay, good catch.
How did we not catch that?
Because I've been looking at it way too much.
People have looked at it. Wow.
Okay, so anything else with those sections?
So if I understood correctly, the way you were proposing this review was going to be is the yellow is some new submissions that we had not seen before, correct? So, for example, in 2.1B, the insertion of the word community, is that
Right.
to differentiate between a city tree versus a community tree? Or what's
Well,
the-
I was bringing some of the verbiage from the original 2.1, Forest Vision and Goals, because it referred to community forests. So I was wanting to incorporate the community feel into the purpose and intent.
Okay.
So that way, we still captured those vision and goals of the community trees.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So, moving on to section 3, administrator. The term designee and city arborist are used interchangeable throughout the ordinance, and one should be selected to avoid confusion. So, one thing we did, and I know we've kind of gone round and round on trying to capture this the exact way we want to capture it. So what we did was add city arborist after designee, add a comma, city arborist. And then we just got rid of that second line to avoid confusion. And then I tried to go through the ordinance and make it all look like this designee, comma, city arborist. But I realized that there may have been some that we've missed. And then as a staff, we looked at it even further, and then we had further thoughts.
Yes, so
on
I think the initial concerns of the planning commission were the designee can only be the city arborist, right? That was the initial concern. So the administrator is the director, and the designee can only be the arborist. So we were trying to come up with this language that basically says the director community development or is her designee, comma, city arborist, so that it defines who could this designee be. Or if Sandra is not here, whoever is in her place, he or she will be the designee. Does that capture the concerns?
Well, and it does and it doesn't.
Okay.
I can imagine that the only time there would be a designee other than the arborist, if there were something pretty significant that happened where we wouldn't have the benefit of Sandra or the city arborist, the named city arborist, to be the administrator of the ordinance. So is there a value to creating the flexibility of a designee when we know that it's going to primarily 99.9% of the time should be Sandra?
Mm-hmm.
Sandra or Sandra? I actually had last time. Sandra, sorry. So if it's going to be Sandra, is there a purpose for saying designee beyond that? Because I would hope what would happen is if there's something that's extraordinary that's going on that requires either the director of community development or Sandra to be engaged on it, it should have the weight and the benefit of your credentials to make that measure. If it's something that's going to be that significant and neither of you are available to that, I think that it should wait. That we should pause whatever that might be to the point where we get the benefit. It's unlikely that both of you would be unavailable for an extended period of time.
I guess I'm scarred from Mark Law, and he was out for almost a year. We had no city arborist. I acted as the city arborist in his absence. We wouldn't have had anything passed during that time. We talked about the fact that we need other arborists on staff. It may not be the city arborist, but a certified staff arborist, which at some point I think you just have to trust who her designee is, that she feels that we're qualified in her absence.
Yeah. Okay. And obviously we hope that
That will never
has
happen
to
again.
deal with that ever again like we did with the loss of Mark but as the purpose of my comment is always going to be for the sake of consistency. We want to make sure that the same measure is being given, whether it's this week or next week, so that the community has the confidence that the administration of it is going to have the same standards. That it doesn't bounce back and forth from one person to the next. And it's like, oh, it's Tuesday, we're going to get Jimmy, and Jimmy's the easy one.
Well, we discussed maybe changing it to certified arborist, because that would mean whoever her designee is would have to at least be another arborist on staff. But then we got caught up with, well, is that going to make it sound like it can be an outside arborist? No, we want it to be an arborist with the city. So it's sort of logistics.
It's hard to capture all the scenarios.
Situation where somebody was actually out, again, God forbid something like that were to happen, couldn't we go back to actually making an amendment to the ordinance because of that situation? So let's just say we got somebody that's going to be out for however long, and how difficult would that be if you ever came across that situation? And that way we can kind of keep with the consistency, and there's two different people that can only make that decision. And for some reason, if there's something totally out of the ordinary and we need to make a change because we can't get any business done, then you can make that change.
Well, I think maybe then leaving it the way it was, where the director of community development or her designee, so that case when the city arborist is not available then the community development director has that authority to make that decision of who the designee should be, whether it's contracting out somebody else or whether it's assigning another staff member who's qualified.
Okay.
So That's just a thought.
What do you
that
guys
maybe
say?
we need
We are open, honestly. We were just trying to come up with, based on your feedback, we were just trying to come up with some language. But if you're comfortable with the original language, we are fine with that also.
I think
Well-
that the dispute, the conversation with regard to the original language here was that the designee might be someone who is not an arborist. And we didn't want to entrust the ordinance to someone who wasn't qualified, let's say. And so I think from where I'm sitting, if Sandra isn't available, then we'd want another arborist to a city person, a designated or qualified arborist to
Well,
fill in.
and I don't know if you want to limit yourself to just an arborist. I mean, I get what you're saying, and I appreciate your respect of arborists. But I think sometimes there are other qualified persons, such as a landscape architect,
Which I wasn't certified when I backed up Mark, but I'm a registered landscape architect, so.
or somebody that has a horticulture degree or similar to a similar degree to forestry or urban forestry or something, that I think you can have another qualified person for a short-term kind of situation. If you're looking at doing like plan review or something for a short little interim plan while maybe the city arborist is out. I mean, I hate to say that because I don't want anything to happen, but I mean, so I wouldn't want to limit yourself just to an arborist. I mean, I understand your concern and I appreciate you wanting to have that qualified person there. But I think a community development director would be able to decide who would be qualified for that. And I don't think I wouldn't want to limit it just to arborists, because I think there could be some other qualified people on staff that may be able to fill it for an interim time. That's going to be able to help with plan review and to kind of keep stuff going. So I think the designee thing of the community development director is kind of the way to go in my eyes.
So I might be more comfortable with it if we change the hierarchy of the sentence structure here, and it was the director of community development, the city arborist, or designee.
Okay, that's a good idea.
Well, and you have to, what we're doing by saying that is that we're giving the authority of the director of community development and the city arborist, whoever is appropriate in that, to have the authority to, we trust our judgment to to appoint the designee. But I think without having to condition this up to the point of being in, so you can't even administer it, we would just propose that that consideration for the designee be only done in such a case where it was going to be for a limited period of time and not ongoing. That's the burden of the city to name a new city arborist if Sandra, you were going to not be available to us for an extended period of time. That the city would have an obligation to have those credentials available to the community again for the administration of it. So without conditioning it up, I think maybe just change the hierarchy of the sentence to bring the city
I think that's
arborist forward
reasonable.
and
That's
put the
something
designee
that's
subordinate
easier.
to that.
That makes more sense that way, I think.
But you're saying that either the arborist or the community development director
Yep.
can designate it.
That's what I'm
So
saying.
you gotta make sure that that's clearly defined in that sentence then, that
Right,
either one
so
of them
you're
can
saying
make
the
designation.
director.
Yeah, that's my suggestion. It doesn't mean you guys need to
No,
roll
I
with that.
agree.
No, I'm fine with
Yeah.
that, having a designee, but again, I would make sure that it's clear that either party can actually designate the person.
Yeah, I think that's why it was in the order that it's written, because it was saying only the director can have a designee or the city arborist. So it was the director or his or her designee or the city arborist shall be them.
Yeah, and we have confidence in the two of you, and Melissa, the example that you gave of yourself being, I mean, you were somebody with trusted credentials that you saw, you maintained the city vision and the integrity of the application of the rules and regulations in that period of time. So it's a great example of how it can work. Okay.
And just back to that consistency thing again, I kind of saw it throughout. Again, I would just name them the same way every time So capital D for director, capital C for
Yeah.
community,
Or
capital D.
what we can do, instead of naming them every time, we can just use the word administrator. And administrator is defined in the definition.
So if you're gonna do it that way, then just make sure you capitalize administrator and
Yes.
that you know, have them. And also, I would say City of Milton Arborist.
Yes, yes, okay.
So, well, actually, we would, oh, okay, no, we got it, I got it. See, I've been looking at it way too much. Okay, so yeah, what I had failed to do was go in and replace them all because I wasn't sure where we needed to replace it and stuff. But then we had a discussion after this was sent out to just replace it with administrator. So that way it kind of covers the director, the city arborist, or his, her designee.
And
You'll
then
have
who said?
administrator in the definition section?
Yeah, and administrator is in the definition section.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, which we'll need to, we could change the order of that in the definitions too. Put Director of Community Development, comma, City Arborist.
And also designee.
We'll keep it consistent.
Yeah, so that way it's,
I would put City of Milton Arborist.
Yeah, I made that note. I think that's a good.
Yeah, and then.
I think
to
there's
Sameed's
something
point,
that
to be
says
consistent-
anytime you're referring to city in the ordinance, it's the City of Milton. Is that already covered? I'll have to
Well, see, then you
double check.
said the director of the City of Milton Community Development Department.
Oh, okay.
Under administrator.
Yeah, okay. Well, I didn't have anything to do with that.
And to Sameed's point, you will have to be consistent with then capitalizing administrator throughout.
Right, yeah, I know I didn't capture all the capitalization on this one.
Usually we count on Fred for that.
Yep.
Fred's our typo and capitalization and punctuation
okay.
master.
Well, I'll send it to him next time.
It's okay.
I was gonna let
I'm
you be
struggling
my
enough
editor.
with-
Yeah, I think I'm gonna need to get an editor because I'm having a hard time keeping up with all this changes. Okay, so,
You can read my chicken scratch. I've done it a lot throughout my copy here if you want it.
yeah, so everybody turn in your copies and we'll compile them all together. Okay. So I think we covered the administrator part. And then the next section, the 3.3 and the 3.4, where you had said that you recognize that waivers are essential and that you wanted to add public transparency. So what we did, I just basically created a new section of waivers, number 5 on page 3. Because before it was just kind of all listed under administrator, which I realized I thought maybe it should just be its own section, waivers. So then what I went in and did, and I added the request for a waiver, must be presented in writing to the Director of Community Development. The written request shall at a minimum include the waiver being requested, a brief description of the hardship and/or how relief from the provision of this ordinance maybe I should say is consistent with intent and purpose of this ordinance. Then I added some more at the next section. The administrator shall keep record of all waivers issued. Every 90 days, any waivers that have been issued will be presented to, we threw this in there as an idea, Board of Zoning Appeals, in parentheses, or we could say Planning Commission, because we weren't sure which one it should go to, for review and to make recommendations regarding amendments to the provisions of this tree canopy conservation ordinance.
Yeah. In terms of hierarchy to that, before it would go to the Board of Zoning Appeals, it should come to the Planning Commission, because the Planning Commission would make a ruling. If they then were unhappy with the ruling of the Planning Commission, and it were ruled then by the mayor and council, then they have a process to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals for that. It's kind of a last resort, I think, to get there.
So do you want to say planning
I
commission
think
here?
Planning Commission
This is
should be
reporting thing, right? Okay.
first in the hierarchy.
Backwards.
Yeah, he's saying planning commission, then
Okay.
council, and then BZA.
Because this
But
is just
then
reporting.
but then it needs to go to the BZA? You're saying,
I think we'll just have to look into that exactly, because I've never seen a situation where a decision of the city council goes to the BZA. I'm not saying it's totally wrong. It usually goes to Superior Court.
Okay.
So Anyway, we can double check that,
The
but,
main point is keeping the hierarchy of planning commission before council.
Right,
So we can keep,
yeah.
is that okay? Okay.
Because this is reporting, right?
Yeah, this is just a report of the waivers, just to see if there are any recommendations. If we're issuing too many waivers, is there a reason why? Is there something that needs to be amended in the text? So that's why I wasn't sure of the process and procedure of where that would need to go, because this is not something that's
so
really
is
been.
it a two-step, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar enough. Is it a two-step procedure?
No, so
or
the
is it just
waivers
one?
actually go to the Director of Community Development. But then we're saying, but what they wanted was to add some transparency of what waivers are being issued, why they're being issued, and, is there something that needs to be, is there a reason why, and do we need to look at doing a text amendment if there is? Am I correct?
So
Is
then
that
it would
what
just go to
we're trying-
planning commission and that would be, it's more of a, sounds like an administrative,
Reporting doc,
Overview.
yeah, reporting thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
So just
Planning
planning
commission.
commission.
So that's
nothing
why
after?
I had thought, that's why BZA popped in my head first, was just because they deal with variances, so waivers are
They're
just.
semi-legislative, but it sounds like you don't really need that.
Oh, okay, so it's
Planning
just a
commission.
review. Okay, see, I'm not as
It should
familiar with these
stop, yeah.
procedure things.
It's fine.
So you're taking Board of Zoning appeals out?
Yeah, so we'll take away Board of Zoning Appeals and just place Planning Commission. So then what'll happen is when we have waivers, basically, we'll present it to the Planning Commission.
And then if you guys come up with a conclusion from that evaluation, then you can make recommendations to Parag and say maybe there, or,
Yeah.
to our department to say maybe this needs to be amended.
It can almost be like a minor plat review,
Right.
where our recommendation has some teeth to it, where it has to go back before the Director of Community Development for final dispensation to it, because we've had a chance to weigh in on it.
Right, and then if we ended up doing text amendments, we would follow the procedure for amending the ordinance.
And just to be clear about the introduction of the consideration of transparency, so there's two parts to that, and you've addressed it in a different way than maybe I initially had asked for that to be considered, but I'm okay with this. I think that when we're talking about transparency being built into the process, I'm thinking about it where it requires public hearing. And so, although this does not accommodate a public hearing, it doesn't call for advertisement, it doesn't call for an assembly of the community to have a chance to weigh in. But if there are a series of waivers being given, and we recognize in that series of waivers that it might warrant additional review, that's when we're suggesting that it's not the individual incident that's being measured, but it's the inconsistency of the ordinance that's generating the need for the waivers. We would have a chance to revisit it at that point. So there's two levels of transparency I'm looking for. One is if there's something that's remarkably outside the parameters of the ordinance, that we're putting a great deal of weight on the Director of Community Development and/or the city arborist to measure on behalf of the community. That does not have the light of day on it in terms of what the community gets to see. But if there's a consistent waiver process happening, then I think it requires the kind of transparency where it goes before the public for a review. And it would come to the Planning Commission for that. Does that make sense? Okay.
And I have some other comments too. So again, just from a cleanup standpoint, like 5.1, it should say the administrator, capital A. And then it says intent of, it'd say intent of the tree ordinance. Again, you've already defined this as a tree ordinance, so keep it consistent that way. And then the last word in 5.1 should be
wait, I'm
capital A
sorry.
for applicant.
Instead of the ordinance.
Instead of
Instead of this
intent
ordinance,
of
say
this
the-
ordinance, it should be intent of the tree ordinance.
So the whole title, the tree.
It's titled Tree Ordinance, lowercase t and lowercase o. That's how you defined it.
So it should be capitalized. And it should reference the,
And then last word, applicant should be capitalized because that's defined. And then 5.2, I would just say a request for a waiver. And then about how it's presented in writing. So do we need to elaborate more on what's considered writing? Is that an email? Is that formally coming into the community development department and giving them something? Or, how do we say, yes, this has been received by the community development director? And again, is it only supposed to go to the community development director, or could it go to the city arborist?
How we do it now is,
Yeah.
well, we have warrants in our form-based code area, and how we do it now is I collect them as part of the required documentation to approve the permit, and then we discuss it as staff, whether we would support it, and then we take those items to the director, then he makes the ultimate decision, and then he's the one who approves it.
So it's the same process, basically. It's the same process, but again, the way the waivers come in, they can come in as sometimes we get a letter sort of a thing, right?
It just has to be written.
It should be written, like we get a written.
Email, okay?
Email is fine nowadays. Yeah, email is okay. No texting, right?
No, but I mean, I'm just saying,
That would be a long
again, to
text.
keep it consistent, have the consistent way, like, okay, by email or by mail addressed to the community development director, or addressed to the department itself, or whatever the case may be, but just keep it that way. It's consistent so that
Sure.
there's
Or
no.
or are they better served by saying, okay, if you're requesting a waiver, you need to fill out
Application.
an
Yeah,
application.
fill out a
Application.
form.
I've
Yeah.
thought of
And
that before.
and that way, it's consistent. You know, if there's been a waiver, you can go to that form in the packet and find that. And this time, it's not an email, and next time, it's a letter. And
Yeah.
that way, you've got a record of it because it was filled out on the city form as a part of the packet.
Yeah, we can create an application, yeah.
I think that would help too, because then we can kind of define what the hardships are, and, because a lot of people are just all over the place with what they call a hardship.
Yeah, and so that was going to be my other comment. So it says a brief description of the hardships. So should it be the brief description of the hardships and how relief from that would be, consistent with the intent and purpose?
Yeah.
Right, so not or,
Right.
Okay.
yeah. And then again, end of 5.2, it should be this tree or the tree ordinance. And then in 5.3, again, capital A for administrator, and shall keep records of all, my suggestion would be to say, shall keep records of all waivers granted, I guess, instead of issued or that are granted. And then,
Approved waivers?
or approved, yeah. And then again, the 90 days, we're going to, I think it's a great idea, but how is that actually going to be calculated, or how's the time frame going to start? When does it start? When is the 90 days? Or, how is that all going to be calculated? I
Maybe we
guess?
should say like a quarterly
Quarterly,
report.
yeah.
Reports, yeah. Every quarter.
And then I would also say, so again, any waivers that have been approved will be presented to the Planning Commission for review, period. And then based on the Planning Commission's recommendations regarding amendments to the provisions of this tree ordinance, or something like that. Again, tree conservation ordinance, it should just be tree ordinance, just to keep it all consistent since you've already defined it.
We're going to give you the final version to
Yeah.
put your eye on it.
I do this every day.
It's just-
Well, yeah, I should have brought you in.
With no charge, that is.
That's right. That's right. Because the volunteerism carry over.
Would have been on your planning commission time. Okay.
Double
so
your pay as a planning commission member.
We'll double your pay for the planning commission. All right, so does that cover the waivers then? Is there any other comments?
Good.
Okay. So the next item was to reinsert subpoint C, which is on page 4. So you'll see what I did actually was combine it with B, since they started the same, any activity that requires, and I just kind of added it to the list. Added what was in C to the list with B. Does that make sense? Okay, is everybody okay with that? To move on?
I think so.
Okay. All right, so the next thing is Ron's favorite subject, tree conservation manual. And we have been trying to wrap our head around this and make sure we get it right. So wait, let me see what page I'm on. So
Number
we're on.
5.
Okay. Okay, so yeah, under tree conservation manual, after we sent this out to you, I think it finally dawned on us what the issue was. We kept going back and forth trying to figure out what the concern was about the adopting of the tree conservation manual and the ordinance. So I think the confusion is under tree conservation manual, it says this is hereby adopted a tree conservation manual that sets forth the required standards. So what we realized is that what we need to do is take out that word adopted. And we just say that this hereby,
Melissa,
What-
help
Yeah,
her out.
so it'd be, there is hereby a tree conservation manual to supplement the tree ordinance that sets forth the required standards, et
So
cetera.
we are deleting the,
Tree canopy.
Tree canopy.
Yeah.
yeah, so we are deleting the word adopted because the concern was if we have not seen the manual, how can we adopt the manual as part of this tree conservation manual ordinance, right? So if it's not like if we are adopting this tree preservation ordinance, we are not adopting the manual which we have not seen, but this is just making a reference that there is a conservation manual which is a supplement to this ordinance.
The, this discussion began because there was inconsistency between the original unmarked copy
Yes.
and the marked copy in the very first meeting. The unmarked copy said that the tree ordinance and the manual were one.
Yes.
And so that's where this, so if they're one, you can't get the tree ordinance approved without the manual.
Yes.
Right.
So to the extent you want to separate the two, then I think that's what you're doing, because I didn't find any reference to that joining
Yes.
in this document, either in the highlighted or the underlined version or the pristine version.
Yes, yes, okay.
okay.
Can we just go back to 6.2C real quick with the red line that you made? So where it says, or utility maintenance repair within their right-of-way or existing easement, is there, who's there referring to?
The utilities.
The utility company? Okay, I think it may be better just to say within the utility company's right-of-way or existing easement, I guess.
Where are you at? I'm sorry.
Sorry, 6.2C.
Top of page 5.
Yeah, top of page 5.
Oh, there's two Cs. Oh, no, okay. I'm with you.
So, okay, I'm sorry, can you?
So, yeah, so I was gonna say to make the change where it says or utility maintenance, or you could say actually or utility maintenance or repair within the utility company's right-of-way or existing easement.
Oh, you're unclear on who there is. Okay.
Yeah.
I got
Okay,
you.
within the utility
Yeah,
right away.
yeah.
Okay,
Within the utility company, I guess, or.
Right,
okay.
Good catch.
Okay.
So going back to your point, Ryan, are you satisfied with the way that now sits, or are you still?
No, I'm satisfied with the way it sits now.
Okay.
I think, the way it sits now, I think it works.
So I have a question regarding the practical application of this. Think about the timeline, if this goes forward to the mayor and council in October or November, depending upon how much amending we do tonight, then as a result of that being completed, you'll be able to begin the work on the
Manual.
When do you envision the city's ability to administer this new tree canopy ordinance with the benefit of, because you can't administer it without the benefit of the manual being completed?
Well, I mean, the manual is complete now. I mean, the manual's done now. There is a manual, and most of the stuff that was changed in the ordinance doesn't really affect the manual. The manual still applies to it because a lot of stuff in the manual, as you saw, is the technical stuff, the how to measure a tree canopy.
Right.
So that stuff's still going to work
Right.
with the ordinance. So what we'll do, as Parag said, I'll try to catch the things that, I'll go through it and see if there's anything urgent that needs to be changed with anything in the new tree ordinance. But I think as soon as this tree ordinance is adopted, we can put it into play, or, well, at least by the deadline. We have the deadline of January 20th, I believe.
I would say the first priority would be anything that we're taking out of here to put into the manual needs to happen first, and then any other revisions that we see as we're moving forward to the manual can be made to after the adoption.
I think the concern is, while, to your question a moment ago, we have separated them in the documentation, and that issue is not in front of us any longer because of the way it's been redrafted. I think the question from my perspective, and perhaps this is where Paul was going as well, is that the documents are still intimately related. As we'll discuss later in several places, you note that this goes to the manual, or that goes to the tree manual. So things that were in the original ordinance are now going elsewhere. And I think from our perspective, we're going to want to make sure that they continue to dovetail. That's the so just sort of cutting to the chase, then can we, a question I'd ask of everyone, can we move forward with this document without knowing what the other document looks like, to the extent that they're integrated, they're intimately intertwined?
So as I mentioned, the changes, if we are saying somewhere, this was part of the ordinance, now it's going to the manual. So we will update that section, and you will have the benefit of looking at that section. So any changes which we are making to the tree preservation ordinance, if it's impacting the manual also, we will make those changes.
Will we know, how will we know, Parag, that that's one way to make sure things have gone over there. The other question would be, we're operating on an existing manual and we've changed the ordinance now. How can we get comfort that the manual now is not in conflict with the ordinance in some way? Because we've made changes in the ordinance.
Okay.
Well, I don't know where a conflict would be off the top of my head, but I mean, I would certainly go through and look, like I said before, the ordinance is adopted, and make sure there's no conflicts. But since it's basically a technical guide, I don't feel like there would be any conflicts.
And we can also give it to the planning commission members if you guys want to take a look.
And usually the way it's done too is the ordinance takes precedent over the manual. So we would follow the ordinance over the manual. If it came down to one said something different than the other, you would go with what's in the ordinance.
Does it say that in the manual or the ordinance?
Well,
I'll look.
Be added.
We should make sure it says that.
Yeah, we should make sure that it's
I have seen that
It is somewhere.
verbiage somewhere,
Yeah.
but I couldn't
Yeah.
point it out right now to you, but
But, you know, from where we're sitting, I think it'd just make our job a lot easier in our discussions with our folks who nominated us for this role, to have had both documents in
In
front of us,
sync.
to be able to read them. Yeah, it's good. Give them a thumbs up, which in turn would make your conversation with them a little easier too,
okay.
I would expect.
So this is good. So based on this conversation, we will do 2 or 3 things. I just want to repeat them. The changes we are making in the tree preservation ordinance, if it will impact the manual, we will make those changes. Number 2, we will put a language in the tree preservation ordinance that basically says, if in case of a conflict, the tree preservation ordinance will supersede the manual, right? Number 3, Sandra will go through the ordinance, will go through the manual and will make sure there are no conflicts. And that's it. Or am I missing something? Right? These are 3 things. And okay.
Yeah,
And-
you're going to have to figure out where that disclaimer goes, where the ordinance trumps the manual.
It was
I was
making,
just looking, I don't see a real obvious place for right now, for it to
There's
go.
an obvious place in the manual.
Yeah.
At the beginning, because it talks about the information in this manual can be revised as necessary with the approval of the ComDev director. And then we can say where there's any conflicts with this in the ordinance
But it
supersedes
should also, that's a great place for it, but it should also reside in the tree ordinance.
the ordinance, because that's the adopted.
Yeah.
And maybe it's just up front and is a disclaimer in the general section, but it would be inappropriate for it to be under title, because it's not the title. And its purpose and intent is not the right place when you go subordinate to that, but I'll leave that up to you guys to find the right place, just knowing that it needs to be up front.
Well, I think you could put it under the tree conservation manual section.
Page 5, which we are looking at.
Judy, what do you think?
Yeah, I think
They
so.
put it there?
We are looking at page 5, yeah. Where we are defining the manual, then we can just say,
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so the other thing with the tree conservation manual section was changing the recommended back to required. So you see that was done in 7.1, it's highlighted.
So maybe going back to the other topic, it goes maybe under 7.2, because that's similar language to what you just said, Melissa, a moment ago. And maybe the second sentence is
Yeah.
that the ordinance language supersedes anything in the manual.
Yes.
So when there's the ordinance, will the manual, where, is the manual going to be a part somehow exhibited through the ordinance or anything like, I mean, how is that? How does somebody know about the manual? Where is the manual, where I can find the manual?
Well, it will be available online. I mean, right now it's available online with the tree. I mean, you have the tree ordinance and then it has the tree conservation manual as a separate document, I believe.
So,
Is this the only place where it's referenced?
yeah, because,
No, it's referenced in other places.
Okay.
you know, where, like in 7.1, where you've got it italicized, the tree canopy conservation manual, or, you know, hereby adopted a tree canopy conservation manual as shown on Exhibit A, whatever, you know, something like that, so that you know, hey, if I'm looking at the ordinance and I want to go to the manual, I know where the manual is.
I agree. I have a similar comment on the approved tree species list,
Yeah,
where
there's no.
they
there's
talk
no
about it, but
cross-reference,
it
yeah, where
doesn't give in a letter or like an exhibit number or a
Yeah.
appendix number.
I thought the tree species list it said it in the manual.
It is part of the manual?
It's a hyperlink, yeah, but I mean.
I was confused. I'm sorry.
Printing
Maybe,
it
I
off.
mean, yeah.
And then it's, you know, it needs to be referenced.
Printing it off, then, you know.
I understand what you're
Well,
saying.
I think the intent, you don't want it to be codified, you don't want to be part of the ordinance, but you want it to be readily available to everybody. So I think what we do, and I know that we're launching a new website and it'll hopefully help it, the organization and for people to find things is to have documents. We have a lot of user guides or, you know, like the building department has a lot of information for the builders on different topics. So I think it's just going to be placed in the website and where it can be readily available for the use by the developers, builders, public, whomever it needs to go to. So, because I think the intent is not to restrict it, but to have edits done when appropriate and with the approval of what was said to the community development director.
You could certainly add something that says that the manual will be available online and maybe you can keep copies in community development department.
Right. Yeah. Because I think the intent is to make it as user-friendly as possible, and we're hoping and praying this new website will be more user-friendly than what it is right now. So that'll help with that goal.
So Robin, you just commented, you don't think that the tree specimen list should be codified as a part of the,
Yeah,
That's
that
their
intent
call.
was so it could be a fluid document if information presents itself that a new species is now not acceptable, we'd be able to take it off the list without going through council or add to the list. Change required details, just technical information as needed.
Does that lessen the requirement on the applicant for the waiver or whatever it is to add something new? I mean, or is that something that falls under the purview then of the city manager or director of community development or city arborist?
Right, yeah.
So at their discretion then, if they decide that there's something that they like, it can suddenly be a part of the tree list or the
So it
specimen
would be
list?
industry
Yeah, so
standard.
see, right here under the tree species list and on page 16, new section 12 of the red lines, which we probably need to change this too. So just realize, this is hereby adopted as City of Milton tree species list as set forth in the tree conservation manual. So the tree species list is
Okay.
part of the conservation manual. And shall include species approved for conservation and planting to meet tree standard requirements.
So it is in this then, so it is codified.
You know.
No, no, but
Mr.
it
No,
won't be
it's not
codified.
part of the manual.
The manual,
Yeah,
it won't
so
be
the
codified.
manual is not codified, it's a separate document.
I
It's a
think getting-
supplement.
I think, again, we're seeing the manual is integral to this. I think where I'm coming at is I'm going to have difficulty saying yes to this. It's just me talking, without having seen
Manual.
the manual and being able to do the back and forth.
Sure. Sure.
Would it make you feel better if we put another line under the tree species list section that said amendments to this list based on industry standard? Something that would codify the fact that we can't just not put crepe myrtles because we don't like them. But something, I don't know, you're better with the technical arborist words than I am, but something about industry standards as they change and new species become, I don't know, like, I'm just thinking of the ash tree, the ash borer issue, and now, we don't want those planted.
Yeah.
That's an industry standard, not just us.
Yeah, I'll tell you why I'm sensitive to that, and that is thinking back to Mark's legacy. He was very specific and very proud and gave good educational grounding for the things that were going to be on that list. And so in honor of that legacy to Mark, I want to make sure that it's hard to change that list. It's not necessarily something that can be done just because there's a change of the wind about one species or another. If there's something hard and fast, like there's an infestation of something that's going to wipe that out,
Yeah.
and we need to introduce something that's going to be more tolerant or adverse to that disease, then of course that makes sense.
And that was the intent
Yeah.
of leaving it in the manual. So maybe if we clarified that in another bullet point under the species list, I don't know, it's just a suggestion.
Yeah, and that I would prefer to err on the side of that for just that purpose. Or maybe it is a qualifying statement that addresses that.
Okay.
All right, well, maybe we'll get to that point when we get to page
16.
16. I'll come back to that rather than write that now.
Okay.
Should we do that?
Yeah,
But
go ahead.
But Ron makes a point again. I know you guys haven't expressed a comment in response to Ron's concern. What do you think about that? And we have a dilemma that there is a discomfort, at least from a couple of us, if not all of us, that we would really like to see the ability, or have the ability to see both before we get to the final stage.
Yeah, I think what Parag was saying was that if there's any changes made in the ordinance that impact the manual, we'll make those before the adoption. We'll make it for you to see. What I was thinking is we would just immediately start with the things that are coming out of the ordinance and getting put into the manual. Go ahead and make that change now so that you can see it.
Yeah.
We'll look for conflicts, and we'll also look through and make sure everything with the ordinance doesn't conflict with what's written in the manual. We'll do all of that prior to adoption. So that
Okay,
you
so
can see.
that being said, with that as a plan, does that mean we have already dismissed Parag's objective to have it in front of the mayor and council for October?
No, again, number one, planning commission should be comfortable with their review, right? It's not like we want to rush anyone. So again, as long as you are comfortable with the manual, this document and everything, we will make sure that you are comfortable with that. And even if we basically, city council's review is basically a work session, a presentation sort of a thing. It's not like we will be asking them for their final approval. So I can easily delay that to November. We can have a staff report sort of a thing.
Right.
Or what we can do, we can just make a presentation and just say this is the place where we are heading. It's not a final thing,
Okay.
but this is sort of a place we are heading. We are working with the planning commission. These are the changes which we are making, and we are working with them on a manual.
Okay, so if you're okay with that.
Yes.
I don't want to dismiss the importance of the objective that you set before mayor and council, and that was to bring that forward and then, in that timeline. If we're delaying that for good reason.
Yes,
and we're all
yes.
agreeing that that's okay, then
No, definitely.
we'll all
Planning
be more
commission
comfortable
members
with
have done so much of work. So planning commission should be comfortable with their review, and then only we will
Okay.
move forward.
all right, thank you.
Besides the point.
That's great.
Good.
All right, thanks, Sandra.
Okay. So are we ready to move on?
Well, I
from
think
the-
we're on page 5, the bottom, where we're talking about the designee again. We just need to change the hierarchy of the language there to address it as we did up
Under
front.
administrator and the
Yep.
definitions? Okay.
And in section 8.1, in the second line, we go definitions except as specifically defined herein, and then we follow that herein with 2 punctuations, a dash and a comma. I think one of them might be,
It's supposed to be a semicolon.
oh, is that, it's supposed to be a semicolon? Okay.
That was part of mine.
Oh, I'm sorry, that was yours, Fred.
That's okay. No, it's okay. I got it late. Yeah.
Okay,
Well, you got it done.
Okay. Well, then, continuing on in the definitions. So I did add 2 new definitions to the ordinance that I wanted to bring to your attention. And that was city tree, which is on page 7. So sorry, we kind of flipped back and forth into definitions, sorry. So the definition for city tree that I added was any tree which is located within any city park, city easement, parkway, or any other city-owned property. Pretty straightforward there, I think.
What's considered a city parkway?
That would be like a like a parkway, a road.
well, like in,
What's
like
your
a,
definition of parkway,
like
Robin?
a,
So it'd be like Deerfield Park
yeah, median,
Maybe you should say in the right of way.
or the right of way?
Yeah, I was gonna
yeah,
say.
right-of-way is what everybody,
Yeah, right.
well, but also right-of-way could also mean, you may have meant to incorporate median here, if there's a median planting.
Right.
This is right away.
Is that considered part of the
Yeah, I
right-of-way?
think if we
Yeah.
did right away, that would kind of cover everything.
Okay,
Because the medians are in the right of way. Right?
Yes, yeah. Right away is like.
Yeah, I know. Then the other definition that was
before you,
added,
Sandra, before you go further, can we go just on lowercase I, city arborist, the designee reference then? Is that going to be adopted there as designee when we're talking about city arborist? Or are we going to define it each time?
That's a good point.
Or not define it, but state it each time? Because if you're doing that, you're then saying designee, and designee could then be carried over into the document as meaning city arborist. And we took time before to differentiate between the two. So city arborist and designee are still not one and the same. So that doesn't work there.
Right.
Yeah.
And you're basically defining the city arborist, not defining designee. So if it carries on as the city arborist definition, we're okay.
And then for city tree, again, all the cities should just be capitalized.
Yeah.
Since you got city defined. Same thing in M, city of Milton, again, you already got city as the city of Milton, so that should just be cleared up throughout the whole.
So I'll let you guys figure out the designee part there, but that needs to be.
Okay. All right, and so did you want to look at the definition for limits of disturbance is on page 9? Well, that's something that was added.
I'm sorry, before we go there, you were about to go to forested area?
Well, that was something that was added back in.
Yeah.
So now, let's see, what page is that? Page 8, that must be 6.2 that you had on there, subsection X needs to be reinserted, so that's the forested area.
Yep.
So that was it.
You kept the same definition.
Yeah, I didn't change the definition, I just highlighted it to let you know that it was added back in.
Great.
Because it was basically undeleted, so all the red lines went away.
Okay. Thank you.
And then the limits of disturbance definition on page 9 is defined as the boundary within which all construction, material, storage, grading, landscaping, and related activities shall occur. So this was kind of to help with the deletion of the construction zone and the improvement area. I keep forgetting what we.
It was that development envelope that we talked about.
Right, so that's why I kind of created the limits of disturbance to kind of cover all that, and then I thought that was a good catch-all for those two definitions.
Okay.
The development permit, just back to development permit, which is R. So can we say issued by the, again, City of Milton Community Development Department, or, again, kind of keep it consistent on who's going to be doing that?
Okay.
Do we have a
By
definition
the City of
for
Milton
tree?
Community.
And then page 8X, if you want to just define, what ISA is, one time at least, and then put ISA in parentheses,
Yeah.
so that way everybody knows.
Okay.
International standard of arborists.
What did you say, a rational standard?
International.
Oh.
What's ISA stand for?
I just made this up.
Yes,
Then
it's
just, again, I'm on this consistency kick, but I've seen it other places in here where, where we've got numbers and we just write the number, and then I've seen it where it's like the number and then we've actually spelled out the number, like 50, and we actually spelled out 50. So I would just do it one way throughout the whole thing. So if you're gonna, typically I always see legal documents as like 50, spelled out 50, then 50 in parentheses. And it would have to be that way throughout the whole thing.
And percent is spelled out.
Percent is spelled out, and 50%, yeah. I mean, literally, it would have to be done that whole way.
Yeah, seriously, can I just hire you?
Yeah, were you to my term?
Well, some of this is how it was written before, and so I didn't touch some of this stuff, so,
Yeah,
but
and
I
I've
get
seen-
what
but
you're
like I said,
saying.
I've seen it also in here where it's like spelled out 50 and then 50 in parentheses. And then it's like 50.
Yeah, I had kind of noticed that
Yeah.
too, but I just hadn't figured out which way to go with that, but yeah.
Same with the square feet.
Same, yeah, everything.
Let's go with all numbers.
Oh,
Move forward.
I don't know, I forget, okay, so, I know, kind of bouncing back, under the definition of applicant, the C, you had asked for the right-of-way encroachment to be added back in, so that was added back in there, that's why it was highlighted.
Page 6, right?
Yes, page 6. So just wanted to show you that that was added back in.
Great, thank you.
So we kind of talked about So the O, that was, I believe, the construction zone.
Yes,
Okay,
page 7.
okay. So we kind of already discussed that, right?
Where are you?
So, I know this is hard following too. So 6.2 O, subsection O was, if I'm looking at the recommendation list, page 2. So you had asked that that be added back in? Oh, no, this was the construction zone that we took out and we have replaced with limits of disturbance that we kind of already went over.
Yeah.
Can we go back to C real quick for applicant? So did we, is, where it says seeking approval for a tree canopy, tree protection, is tree protection the same as tree protection zone?
Yes, applicant. Tree protection or tree protection? Tree protection.
The reason, because tree protection zone has been redlined out.
Yeah. And we need,
Right, no, that's not the same thing. That's like a tree protection plan. As you see, it kind of goes tree canopy, tree protection, or tree planting and maintenance plan. So all those are supposed to be followed by plan. Does that make sense? So it's supposed to be tree canopy plan, tree protection plan. Does that make sense?
So, and I know I made a note of that later on, I think that comes up to, again, do we want to somehow define that? I don't, is that what's considered a tree planting and maintenance plan? I don't know. Does anybody know?
I mean, it's,
Well, all that's kind of discussed in Article 3 is where you get into what the requirements are for a development permit. You have to
Right.
submit a tree canopy plan and a tree protection plan. So all that's kind of outlined in there, but I mean, we could look at adding definitions for those.
Yeah, and I think a definition would be probably helpful that way. Again, you're consistent. And whatever somebody's going to submit to you is consistent.
Okay, so are you ready to move on?
well,
Oh.
sort of. So on page 9, on lowercase gg, we've added tree protection zone there. But you said that's not that's not really a definition, right?
Well, it's deleted, actually.
Because we struck tree protection zone from the definitions, and we've struck construction zone.
well, this
from
is
the
something we noticed after we issued, and we want to add tree protection zone back in there, the definition on page 12, III.
So, but tree protection zone and construction zone are really two different things.
They are.
So is construction zone going to go back in?
No, construction zone is being replaced by the limits of disturbance in the critical root zones.
Okay,
But the tree protection zone does need to stay because we're saying that the entire tree is being protected, not just the critical root zone. So someone couldn't come in and chop off part of the crown and say it's not protected.
so in the construction zone, we define the distances, and in the limits of disturbance, there is no hard parameter to that. It just says the boundary within which. Does that mean that that's going to be a variable based on each of the individual construction sites?
Yes, and you'll see later when we added in with the tree canopy requirements that they have to actually reserve a third. So that motivates them to keep that construction or that limits of disturbance as tight as it can. And that's something that we do under plan review. If we see that they can tighten their limits, that's the first comment.
You said preserve a third?
Yes.
Okay, so it means they can still take out
The
two-thirds.
third of the requirement has to be met with existing conserved trees. You can't just wipe it all out and then plant back.
Okay, it's,
We can talk about that when we get to that section a little bit.
okay, yeah, because I want to, because I'm glad that those things are there, but if I'm understanding where you are so far, it's not as tight as we talked about doing for an individual who is carving into a previously, a wooded area. You got a tree stand and they want to drop their house in the middle of it. It doesn't really restrict that by hard parameter as the construction zone did before. Unless there's more for me to understand when we get deeper, and I missed that. If that is the case, if it's there, I didn't see that.
That was happening in that one, we deferred, Paul.
Yeah. So just to be, so we can come back to that when we get to that point.
Okay.
But let's not lose that. I want to better understand the relationship between construction zone, tree protection zone, and Melissa, whatever you just said was the third?
The limits of
The
disturbance.
limits of disturbance area.
So we dropped construction zone and improvement area. Those were the offset where you were either forced to take it out in the construction zone. And that was to help with the situation where people say they're saving it, but we know they're not because they're construction. So that is replaced by critical root zones. So now we know where the critical root zone of the tree is. If you're encroaching in that, you can't say you're saving it. And then the other issue was the improved area, and that is where you are allowed to clear. That's been replaced with limits of disturbance. So you are only allowed to clear where the construction area is. You wouldn't be able to clear far past. And then to limit that, you would have to maintain a third of conserved trees of your requirement to help motivate them to keep that as tight as they could in conjunction with the critical root zones, because if you encroach into any of those, you have to replace.
By saying a third, it's not necessarily, the scale of that could be significant. If I think about the developments taking place right now, the new carve-in that's happening on Freemanville Road, just in between the two White Columns developments, there's some pretty significant tree stands right now that are being taken out for that development. It's, it's going to be a good development. It's large lot development. So it's consistent with some of the things we want to have as Milton. But if you just say, if it's a large, there's pasture land there too because it was an equestrian estate before, but there are some significant tree stands in there. So their development area is only required to maintain a third. That means they can take 2/3 of those tree stands out, where if we know on a lot-by-lot basis, when it's being actually developed for the individual home site, if it were defined more succinctly within that home site, it's a smaller amount of trees that are being taken out when you say a third versus the overall development when you're saying we're now carving into the, whatever there is, 21 acres right there. A remaining third of 21 acres, if it were all wooded, is very different than a remaining third on an individual acre or 2 acres when you're doing that. Do you see my point with that?
Yeah, we discussed if there were 10 trees, 2 would stay versus 9 acres, 3 acres would stay. Yes, I understand. And, one of my concerns was just, and one of the initiatives of this was to prevent clear cutting of the lot, property line to property line. So.
Right.
But I think with the motivation of specimen tree, wanting to save your specimen trees, any developer will tell you saving the trees is cheaper than cutting them down and replanting. So with the fact that most ordinances don't have a 1/3 requirement of conservation. So that's going to force them to find places where they can conserve trees, which are going to be around the perimeter where your house is not at. That in conjunction with the critical root zones, that we're not going to allow encroachment into that, and the other things that we've discussed, I believe will accomplish that goal.
Okay. Well, I guess let's continue.
Yeah, let's keep it
make
in
sure we
mind.
can get to the same page because I don't think I'm there yet.
Okay.
So you want to increase the number of 1/3, right?
I'm sorry.
So
Ross.
you want to have more than 1/3 preserved.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm not sure right now, Parag, that the use of the reference of Wyeth, that the third is the correct measure. I'm saying that when you look at the way we wrote the construction zone, that was very confining, and we originally wrote that for good, for good reason, that it was intended to be just the 30 feet beyond the improved area is as far as they could go. That ensured that a whole lot more than a third probably was going to be protected. So if we're going to give up on that, I need to find more, I need to have a higher level of confidence that we're still going to have that kind of preservation when we consider some of the range of parameters that we just talked about. You're talking about a tree stand on 2 acres, what's preserved, versus a largely forested area on a 21-acre development. The third remaining on those is 2 very dramatically different outcomes. Okay? So I'm not sure we're there yet on that, but
Okay.
let's continue and we'll come back to that.
Okay.
Can we go back to a couple of these other ones? CC, page 9, section CC. So I would just say limits of disturbance, I would say the boundary, then which. And then for DD, where it says live crown at the end, is that defined? What's considered a live crown?
Well, if it's not under what we've already read, I don't think it's there.
Yeah, because there's live crown ratio, but there's.
Yeah, I mean,
It's a tree crown that's alive.
yeah. I mean, no,
Or
the
crown,
live
I
crown.
guess, or crown. Defining crown. I
Crown.
mean, kind of cross-referencing the tree protection zone where it says the tree's trunk and the entirety of the tree's crown. Do we need to define what considered the tree's trunk and what's considered the tree's crown?
Well, I'll have to look at that and see even where live crown ratio is used. I don't,
Crowns.
I think it's in the manual.
is it in the manual?
Oh, okay. The trunk. Or live crown, yeah, okay.
So, I mean, yeah, we could look at defining live crown or just expanding on that definition to make sure it's clear.
Yeah,
Or
okay.
we could go with Webster's definition. Isn't that how we usually do it? If it's
Yeah,
not defined in there, you default to Webster.
And then in MM, last sentence, I would just take out the word any in front of specimen tree and any in front of heritage tree, because you've already defined specimen tree and heritage tree. So. But then, yeah, again, for III, page 12, the tree protection zone, trunk, I don't know if there's a
No.
definition for trunk.
No. So crown is listed, but trunk isn't.
Live crown.
Crown is listed, but trunk isn't?
Correct.
Crown is defined.
Crown is defined.
Crown is
Live
defined.
crown, I don't know if that
No,
is
I
a
don't.
definition. And then trunk is not.
Yeah, we don't have live crown.
So we could just add a definition of trunk.
Yes, no.
Okay, well, one of the other things I want to note in the definition section is the structural root plate definition on page 10, TT. We did change the word must and put may be required to be removed as determined by the city arborist there. And then we also added back the definition of topping at the bottom of the page, WW.
I'm sorry, say the last part again, Sandra? I got
We added back
the
the-
may versus must, but then what?
We added back the definition of topping, WW, at the bottom of page 10.
But so that, in structural root plate, so, after the semicolon, since this is blah, 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 all the way to city arborist, is that really considered a definition? That's more of just like, that's not really a definition. They're not in there yet. Right, the first sentence, I guess, would be the definition, the first part. Could this be, I think this needs to be put somewhere else.
When you say, since this is the area, right?
Yeah. It's not a definition.
You're explaining what the definition is. Right? You're explaining.
Explaining
What exactly it is.
Yeah. Ramifications.
So does that go into the tree manual with the definition of why you need to preserve the structural root plate?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
Yeah. Yes, you're trying to elaborate.
It's a technical issue. It's natural to put it in there.
Yeah.
We're going to take
And
structural.
we can have some diagrams
Oh,
explaining it.
I think we should take out just this part after the semicolon.
Here, yeah.
This to this.
Yes.
That's
All the
not
way
the
to the end, though?
Well, it says, any damage to structure will be will put the tree at high risk for failure and may be required to be removed as determined by the city arborist. Shouldn't you just say what the structural root plate is? And that's the definition. And then this is, in the manual or wherever else.
How they do it.
Yeah.
You were supporting the manual. See, we're embracing this whole manual thing now.
Yeah, but I don't know if I would put that in the manual or if I would put that, I'll look at that, but I think we're going to have to put it maybe in the tree canopy plan section or something of Article 3 so that people know when they're working on their plans that this is going to be something that has to be looked at and something that's going to have to be shown.
As a part of a tree plan and maintenance plan definition. This is what's included in your plan.
Yeah, the protection of the structural root plate.
Right.
Well, in
No,
Article,
this part.
Yeah.
Article 3 is kind of where it goes through the requirements of a development plan, and you have to have your tree canopy plan and what you're required to show on there.
Right.
So I'll look at that and see where it makes sense.
Got it, yeah. And then the first sentence of that, so for conserved tree, the ground and soil area to the depth of 30 inches. Add the word "the."
So I'm sorry, say that again.
Sorry, the first sentence, and the first part of that. So it says for conserved tree, the ground and soil area to the, add the word "the," depth of 30 inches.
Would it be they or a to a depth of 30 inches?
Or a depth.
A depth.
We should take Sumit's notes.
Yeah, really. Okay, and I think we mentioned III, tree protection zone, we looked at again and decided that is going to be added back. So I know it's shown as struck through now, but that's going to be added back.
I is back.
Yes.
So then can we jump to EEE, the Tree Canopy Conservation Manual? So just going back on that discussion, and just tell me, so where it says, a supplement to the tree ordinance containing standards and procedures required for tree ordinance compliance. So does that mean that the tree ordinance doesn't have the standards and procedures that are required? Or, what does that mean when it says what's required is in the tree conservation manual?
Yeah. So it's using the word supplement. So that's good, right? Okay. But what do you mean procedures required?
Yeah, I don't know if it should say maybe procedures there, because what did it say under tree conservation? It says, sets forth with the required, well, it's just using the same verbiage that's on page 5 under the tree conservation manual. The tree conservation manual sets forth the required standards and procedures for all activities required by the tree ordinance.
So it defines here also, and then.
I know, yeah. We got to have definitions everywhere.
I think it's important that it says required because we don't want them measuring.
Well, yeah, but I'm saying, does it say
Just use
procedures?
the same
So the
language.
reason why I'm saying, questioning the word required, because if we're saying this is not going to be codified,
No,
then I'm not sure if required is the right word to
I
use.
know, I see what you're saying, but I can't, I don't know how.
If they're separated and they're, have nothing to do with each other, and you only got to follow the ordinance, then you can't have anything that's required in the manual, but then it's potentially not in the ordinance.
So let's not use the word required, just say are in the, a supplement to the tree ordinance containing standards and procedures that are
Are
not required.
contained,
Yeah, that are contained in the,
Tree ordinance.
that are contained in the tree ordinance.
I would want to check with legal on that to make sure we could even enforce these procedures then, because these are the ways that you have to measure tree canopy. These are the procedures that you have to use to follow the tree ordinance. It tells you how to assign tree canopy coverage, determine actual tree cover versus standard.
Well, but mostly when the tree conservation manual is referenced is like when you have the parking lot section and it says refer to the manual for your soil volume requirements for your parking lot islands and stuff. I think that's when the required part comes in, when the ordinance specifically says to refer to the conservation manual. So that may be like a question for legal
that's a really good question.
about how that needs to be worded. And I was planning on having a legal review after we work through these changes to make sure that things changed are legal.
Although we are getting a legal review by planning commission fees
No.
also.
Yeah, Samit's providing that for you right now.
Yeah.
You're getting your money's worth tonight.
All right, so is there anything else in the definitions that we need to cover? I think we went through everything under definitions on the recommendation list.
So do we say?
Not at the moment.
With the
Until
tree
we get
species
through
list?
it and come back. I'm sorry, go ahead, Samit.
Sorry, no, the tree species list, did we say, it is in here, it's not gonna be exhibited or not? Because then HHH,
I think it is part of the manual, and that was clearly stated, but we probably need to make sure it's exhibited, the manual itself is exhibited. Wow.
or where in the manual, yeah, so for HHH,
Okay.
tree species list, you know.
Yeah, and
So you're saying add a definition for tree species list?
No,
No.
I mean,
Reference.
no, I'm just saying,
Make
To-
sure it's in the manual.
yeah, basically make sure wherever that's gonna be cross-referenced. So the city of Milton tree species list, okay, where is that, you know? Is it as shown on Exhibit A to this, or is it, where is it?
Yeah, it says which is located in the tree conservation manual. But then I was thinking under the tree conservation manual, we should make sure that's
That's
exhibited.
exhibit in there?
so to the point earlier about required and enforceable and whatever, this says that it's the tree species approved and not approved.
Yeah, because it has a list of approved trees and then it has
Right.
the non-approved.
So we're not using the word required here, but there is an approved, implying that if it's a not approved and you plant something that's not approved, it's enforceable. So if the manual is a manual or a guide, that's not necessarily enforceable.
I don't think the manual, just because it's not adopted, means that it's not enforceable.
That's the point that I'm trying to make, is that we have to make sure that as we're looking at the value of the manual, that's, to be honest, that's kind of an overriding concern that we've talked about collectively, is that it needs to be an administrative manual that has the weight of the ordinance and is enforceable as such. And then we talked around whether or not the manual does carry that weight or not.
I think this is a legal question too, to make
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah,
It's
well,
the
I
whole
think,
codified versus non-codified question too.
Where we're dropping words like adopted and required, we need to make sure through legal that that's not taking the validity away from the manual.
So in your legal discussion, I would just ask that you please try to get clarification of that. Because that will arrest some of the concerns that, where I have felt a sense of urgency to load up the ordinance side of it, because in my mind, that's the more enforceable part of the document. And the manual is more of a guide, but we're suggesting it has requirements, or it has, in this case, for this part of the conversation, an approved and not approved list, which would imply if you were doing something approved, you're okay. If it's not approved, then we may have to enforce something.
yeah, I think what it's referring to though is the approved and not approved, because there are species on the list that are not approved for planting.
Yep,
Yeah, that's what we just said, but.
Okay.
yeah. But if somebody does plant that,
Well, the not approved just means it doesn't get canopy credit. I don't think it's saying it's illegal to plant it.
well, if there's an invasive species down here that is known to be, problematic in other parts of the country, and somebody says, oh, I'd like to have that here, but all of a sudden it wipes out another type of tree.
Well, and there's also trees on there that this says you don't get credit for them if you plant them because they're not.
Wipes out the
Right.
element.
I get the value of the credit part, but I also want to make sure that we have an enforceable part that says if it's a not approved tree, it's not just that it's not, or whatever the species is, it's not that it's just not approved for canopy credit, it's because we prefer not to have it here. If it's, let's say something is invasive to crepe myrtle, and there's a lot of crepe myrtle in our area that's, years and years of growth, and they're part of the look and feel of Milton. So if there was something that suddenly introduced something that creates a demise to that tree, they shouldn't be able to plant that. And it should be enforceable. So, okay.
And I need the teeth to be able to require those things in the manual. I can't have an applicant just say, no, it's in the manual, it's not required. That's a guide.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah,
I think
that's
there's-
exactly the conversation that, we've been around long enough to have endured with people making applications to us. And then it's just a guide. Well, no, it's our law.
Right.
Then
I
is
will
it
say
codified or not codified?
Yeah, there's things in here that are meant to just be guides, like
Yes.
how to fertilize your tree.
Yes.
Because, really,
Not
we
required.
shouldn't be telling people how to fertilize their tree or water their tree. But then there are things in here, like I said, in the parking lot section where it specifically says you must have the soil volume as described in the, that is enforceable to me. Once the tree ordinance says you must have per
Yep.
the tree manual. But, so I think there's stuff in here that is going to be enforceable as a requirement. And then there's stuff in here that's going to be more like guidelines.
Yes, and you and I both appreciate the difference of that. But
Right.
where we bump into the issue that I really, emphatically ask that you get legal clarification on is your and my interpretation of that may be completely acceptable for us in our administration of this, but not when it comes down to a legal situation where somebody has planted something that you think is enforceable in here, and legal says, nope, it's not, because it's not codified.
Let's check with legal, and if it's an issue, consider removing the items that are required, putting them in the ordinance.
That's exactly the overriding umbrella for this, for me, on that.
Okay.
And then one more comment on definitions, so JJJ, or unhealthy tree. So at the end, it says as determined by a certified arborist. We need to change that to,
The city arborist?
city arborist or administrator, or however we're defining it.
We want it to be by our arborist,
Yeah.
not an arbitrary arborist or some
Okay.
self-hired.
I'd slightly disagree with that, because if you're talking about trees on private property, you don't want the city arborist going out there and declaring unhealthy trees necessarily, because it's going to set the city up for liability. So, but if you have a private certified arborist do it and they submit a report, I think that's perfectly acceptable.
For the city arborist's consideration, do they have to present it to you to get the tree removal permit?
Yeah, they would have to submit something from a certified arborist, yes.
But does that give you
Okay.
the authority to reject it if there's a reason why you don't support the claim?
Yeah, I mean, we could add something in there about, and being reviewed by the city arborist. But I don't think we would want to change that, though, to just city arborist. I think we would want to leave it as certified arborist, but I think we want to throw in the ISA, because I didn't catch that before.
Yeah, with
And then I
final-
think we'll say with,
Final approval reserved.
yeah,
But then, I mean, again, it's saying as determined by a city certified, or even if you say ISA arborist, that doesn't mean it's still determined that way. The city arborist still has to make the determination.
well, right, with final approval.
Approved by the city arborist or something,
As approved,
and approved by the city arborist.
That way it removes liability of you having made that determination, but you're going to agree with the certified arborist who's presented that to you, or disagree.
If they present the documentation that goes with, I mean, most certified arborists are going to go out and do like a full report. There's standardized forms that you use in the arboricultural industry that's put out by ISA and other groups that you go out and it tells you, how to evaluate the tree and you give it like a rating system and kind of stuff. Or there's certain reports that if somebody types up a report and says, per my inspection, I found XYZ, and I go out there and look at it and yeah, I can see that it has that and I'll go with it. But yeah, I think it would need to be left like that.
Is that procedure in here? Is that procedure in here as to what the ISA arborist would do and present to you?
No, that's just something that an ISA arborist will know. I mean, that's part of their,
Certification.
yeah, it's part of their
The
certification.
manual that talks about arboriculture standards, technical standards, it references the requirements specifically.
So then, I mean, really, an unhealthy tree can only then be determined by you as the city arborist. Obviously, the procedure before that, where the private owner gets their own certified arborist to go and check it out and then presents you with this report, but that wouldn't be what the definition would be. The definition would be that you would be saying that this is an unhealthy tree. So somehow we got to make sure that the procedure on how that's done and for you to make that determination is in here.
Well, we could say as determined by a ISA certified arborist
But it's not going to be determined.
and/or the city arborist.
It wouldn't be determined by them, though, at that point.
Approved. Right?
As presented, or some, I mean, it would have to be as presented to the, city arborist by a certified ISA arborist, or, or something like that. And again, and approved by the city.
How about
arborist.
as documented by a certified arborist?
To be documented by a certified arborist and then presented to, and then, presented to you that you actually made the determination. Again, you can't say that. If you say that they've determined it, then they've determined it. And you're saying that's not the procedure.
Well, let's go back to the individual homeowner. I happen to be in a situation right now that, major limbs falling off. That would still require me to get a certified arborist out to determine that tree's unhealthy.
But they don't have to, right? Could
Yeah,
they just
not
come to you?
necessarily. I mean, if you're applying for a tree removal permit, we look at,
Well,
Several.
that's where I'm getting, or the tree removal. So one way or another, I have to come as a citizen. I have to apply to have that unhealthy tree removed. And then you would determine whether it's unhealthy.
Based on the information.
And if you think that will
Okay,
happen,
so-
pigs fly.
What's that?
I said, if you think that that will happen, pigs will fly.
Okay. So there's several things that you look at when a homeowner applies for a tree removal permit. It's not just, is the tree healthy, unhealthy? You look at their canopy coverage, what their canopy coverage is. And basically when the healthy, unhealthy comes into play is if recompense is required. An unhealthy tree does not require recompense. So if I went out and made a visual inspection and determined, yeah, there are some visual inspections, there are some, okay. So I would base it on a visual inspection, but I wouldn't like say, this is an unhealthy tree on record. I would just say no recompense required. But, so the thing is, we just try to get out of evaluating trees on private property.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
That's
So
where I
if
was
you
going.
want it, but if I said, hey, this tree appears to be in fair or better condition, so therefore I'm going to require recompense for it, and you said, but I think the tree's unhealthy and I don't want to do the recompense, I just want to take the tree down, then I would say, well, then you would need to provide a document or a report from an ISA certified arborist to get that waived. So that's the only time it'd really come into play on a existing homeowner situation. Does that make sense?
This discussion reminds me that we had a similar discussion the last time we got together. And that was, and you guys were in a huddle on it over the course of the last month. And that was the use of, let's call it preferred arborists, or so as you could be more comfortable with the information you're getting from whoever the arborist might be. What did you guys conclude in that area?
Now, are you talking about registering tree companies or doing a list of preferred professionals?
Well, the discussion was last time in certain parts of this, not necessarily this specific section, you're relying upon information provided by arborists who have been retained by developers. And the question was, how are you confident that these arborists are indeed giving you good information? Is it possible that you would it be a preferred approach to have a list of preferred arborists that you can trust, that you can have the developer select amongst?
No, we don't usually like to keep preferred lists because then it looks like we're recommending somebody, and that's something that cities usually try to avoid. You can't really refer or recommend somebody, and then it looks like an endorsement. But what I usually look for, or what I encourage people to do, is find an ISA certified arborist, and I get something from somebody that's ISA certified. I know that they have certain credentials in their pocket, and that I can usually rely on what they give to me. So that's what we typically do, is if people are looking for someone, I just encourage them to find an ISA certified arborist, and I give them the resources of websites and stuff that you can go and you can search and find people in your area that have the certification.
Would you accept whatever documentation from a non-ISA certified arborist? Okay.
No.
Okay. Another question with regard to unhealthy trees. I had a conversation this last week with someone who feels that one of their neighbors is poisoning trees. And so as they're planning on developing the land or whatever, and as a way to perhaps eliminate or avoid any fee payment. How does, if someone goes and poisons trees on their property to avoid whatever, how is that handled in here? It seems like it should be extra punitive, but I'm not sure I found anything specific to that.
Well, that would be covered under the passive protection of a tree. So you're not passively protecting it because you're not avoiding harmful activities that could hurt the tree.
Yeah, but I don't know how you would go about proving somebody poisoned a tree, though.
if you found poisons in the ground around it?
Yeah, but the
Well-
city can't typically go in and just do soil test on private property.
Unless there's an open permit.
Well, even then, I mean, we wouldn't do a soil test.
Well, having a place on Lake Lanier, I can assure you that it is done on a consistent basis, even to where word spreads, hey, the best way to do it is.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, I hear those conspiracy theories too. I mean, I
So
hear
they have
that
a better
stuff
view
go
of the
around.
lake.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I know that.
I have three, I can quote 3 different ways right now.
Really?
But
I went to
I
forestry
don't
school. I
see
can give you
how-
lots of ways.
In a lot of this, I think these are points that are what I call uncontrollable.
Right.
I mean, I don't know the word, I mean.
Yeah, we can't monitor everyone's
Unhealthy
property.
tree. For every one that calls you, there are 100 others, I'll guarantee, will take their tree down if it looks like the one that's in my front yard. I mean, there have to be 100 of you running around here to do that. So I think those are the things that you could put everything as best we can, but there are some things that aren't controllable.
Right, I
And
agree.
I think that probably would be the case.
So in that scenario, Melissa, you think it's under the protection plan, where it would be,
Yeah, and also defining the tree protection
Gonna go
zone. If they did anything to any part of the
Poison
tree,
trees.
it would be actively killing it or not or
Right.
passively protecting it.
right, or
Okay, fine.
in a construction situation, and we talked about it, they're not protecting the root,
Yeah,
root plate, they're parking heavy equipment, they know they're crushing the soil and the roots, that would be considered that kind of activity.
Yeah, or in a construction zone, they're dumping paint under a tree, you know, or something.
That's
Yeah,
active
that,
tree protection. This passive involves if there is no construction, there's nothing going on, it would be prior to a permit submittal. If it's a protected tree, you have to passively protect it. I don't know how you would prove it or enforce it, but
Right.
it is covered in this ordinance.
okay. That's the best you can do.
Thanks.
And then in the unhealthy tree, now, do we need to define like what's considered severe mistletoe infection or, I don't know if that's somewhere cross-referenced, and what's that? Because that's just one thing, right? So if it's considered severe mistletoe infected tree, then it's considered unhealthy. And more than likely, you would say, yes, this is an unhealthy tree. Right. I don't know, again, if that standard
Well, I mean,
language
those are
that's
kind of-
used
These
in-
are arboriculture standards.
yeah. And that would kind of be at the discretion of the professional.
So, number 4 in the manual says, all tree care operations regulated by the tree ordinance, including protection, establishment, maintenance, blah, 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 should be in accordance with, and it talks about the ANSI standards. These are the arboriculture standards that these professionals follow, nursery stock standards, and it references all of the different documents that set those for the industry. I would assume these things are covered in there. I don't know, but.
So, yeah, I mean, again, so should something like, so some of these ways that it's considered to be an unhealthy tree then somehow be cross-referenced to the ANSI standards or wherever the case, wherever those standards are listed? So that way, again, it's just consistent, and you're going by this nationally recognized standard.
Yeah, we can look at that.
Check 30 to 50% and make sure.
Instead of highlighting,
Standard.
I think they need to use that language. as to
Yeah, I mean,
where it is.
again, yeah. Or some sort of general
General,
thing, just like you said, so if it's as generally stated in the ANSI standards or whatever, what's considered, I don't know, something like that, but,
rather than identify, I think that's what you're saying, identify severe mistletoe, severe insect. You drop that out there.
potentially, yeah. I mean, just look into that.
I agree,
on how
because
to kind of clarify.
clarify.
Yeah.
That and referencing the standards might be more broad. to
Right,
capture other
exactly. That was,
I mean, again, and that would then potentially, if somebody is an ISA certified arborist, you know, who's not the city arborist, then obviously they're familiar with those standards. And, I mean, again, that would give them some latitude, I guess, too, but again, ultimately, you guys still make the determination, but.
We'll look into that. I made a
Yeah.
note of it.
Okay.
Read through the definitions.
I think so. Is that it for definitions?
I think so.
Okay. All right, so moving on page 3 of the recommendation list, under section 8, specimen trees. 8.1, this is where we got into the definition of a specimen tree on page 13, sorry, of the red line.
Oh, are we gonna still do the highlights on page 12?
Added some stuff back in.
Trees, the protected tree?
We're kind of following the order of
Oh.
the list, which jumps around.
Okay. Okay.
If you'd like to go in order
Well,
of the
we can-
ordinance, we can do either.
Yeah, let's just go ahead and do that.
Because I think protected tree, you've already got that defined. So I
Yeah.
don't know why, so you don't need this again.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, maybe, I don't know if that was actually changed, the removal of a protected tree.
So that's a good point, it's duplicated.
Was that is duplicated in the definitions?
I think so.
It's on page 9, yeah, MM.
Yeah.
Yeah, same thing on specimen tree. And did we define heritage tree?
Yeah. Yep.
So we can remove this.
I think we should remove it
take out,
if you have duplication.
taking out everything.
Just remove the 9.2?
Yeah.
Oh, should.
Does everyone agree with that?
So we have the definition. Now we're moving from definitions to another section that's not definitions, right?
This is application.
So this is application of that. So does that stay here, or does that move to the manual?
As a professional that used to do tree plans, I loved it when they were in the definition because it was quick, easy to find. You could define the sizes of their protected trees
Okay.
right away, rather than.
So if that's the case, we've got more definition here under the protected trees than we have in the protected tree definition.
I was noticing that.
So we have to decide to either go more or less with appropriate,
No, but the second part of 9.2 is actually not,
right, it's not.
that's not a definition.
Right. So where does that go? Is
Right.
Is kind of where I was going to go with that.
Right.
I feel like everything that's in 9.2 is stated under the protected tree section. Is there something?
Definition?
Or definition.
Okay.
Yes. Is there something that you feel is left out?
The second half of 9.2.
It's at the bottom, maybe, where it says any specimen tree or any heritage tree.
Well, the fact that the removal of it.
Oh, you're talking about the next section.
Yeah, which I think is supposed to be another number. I mean, that should be 9.3. I don't,
It might be the new 9.2.
yeah.
Well, really, I don't even think you need 9.1.
Right.
Yeah, which is,
That language needs
Like
to
it-
reside somewhere.
yeah.
We can't,
I think it should be under here, so that section that y'all were talking about should be 9.1. Remove 9.1 and 9.2.
There again, you got
Say that again.
Take this out, this out, and this. And this is in the definition.
Okay.
So you could actually leave 9.1 because it's declaring that it's already defined. And then in the definition of what it is, then you're saying how or what happens to it if something happens to it. You can take out 9.2, right?
Yeah.
But in 9.2, the first sentence
See, we
can be
don't say
taken
that.
out. But a tree removal permit shall be required for a protected tree.
Yeah.
Needs to stay somewhere. Does
Okay.
that become the new 9.2?
Yes.
The 9.2 comes out.
So you're saying keep 9.1, there is hereby established a category of trees?
Yeah, because what it's saying, we're not defining it here. We're saying it's already been defined.
As defined
And
herein
then,
is the
and then subordinate to that, we're saying permit is required to remove a protected tree.
But does as defined herein mean in this section or in this
I think it
ordinance?
means in the ordinance.
I
We
think in
could
the
add,
I was reading it as within the ordinance.
yeah.
Well, it's two at first and then I pushed and I.
But then we don't, I mean, we don't do that.
Well, if we
elsewhere.
add,
We don't do
in
that
the
same
tree.
thing elsewhere, though. So if we're gonna do that.
All right, well, if we're doing that,
Define everything.
We gotta do it everywhere else, so where's heritage?
we have to be consistent for a specimen tree and then heritage
Yeah,
tree.
exactly, right, we don't do it elsewhere.
So what's I guess what we're asking is, what's the intent of this next section where we're going back to those? They're not definitions because we've already defined them.
The intent is to say that you have to get a permit if you're gonna remove a protected tree.
Okay.
Right.
So is this really a removal section?
Yep.
We're saying what we're gonna do.
For
I mean, that's out.
administration.
I don't think 9.1 really should be in there.
okay,
either.
well, we can,
We don't do this, we already,
at that.
we know it's defined. So I don't really think this should be in here.
Yeah.
We gotta figure out
Wanna
where
endorse
this goes. Does this stay here
Exactly, a tree removal.
or go somewhere else?
But you have to have a process.
And that's a tree removal.
So what do you think, Sandra? Are we?
well,
If it's the administration of these next three things, a protected tree, a specimen tree, and a heritage tree, it's the administration of those. What happens to them if there's a problem, you want to remove one? Here's the standards by which that can take place.
right,
That's not really a definition. So it's
Right.
okay to say maybe you don't even have to say it's been defined. Maybe that's a restructuring of that sentence that's required. But it says, here's the administration of these things if there is going to be an engagement of them. I'm not necessarily saying it needs to be to say for removal, because you don't want to encourage removal, and oh, by the way, here's the process how you remove it. But
Yeah.
I guess what's the purpose behind this whole next section, and if it's process related,
So you use the word engagement.
yes.
So that's a good word, right? So first we are talking about definitions, so it's being defined now, but now if we want to engage with them, this is the way how we work with them, engage them. Right? So this is not only the definition, this is application.
right. Well, I mean, I really just followed the format of the original ordinance and just kind of tried to make some changes. So, and the format setup wasn't always clear to me, but I just kind of went with it. But I see what you're saying. I mean, and that's one of the things I noticed about the ordinance is it does repeat a lot, and that's why I went through and tried to get rid of a lot of redundancy.
We're entering a whole next section here.
Right,
But there's not a differentiation in the way it's formatted. And the formatting is really what's creating the problem for us.
I think it's important, this part of the sentence where it says hereby establishing a category of trees is important. And that's sort of selling me on the fact that it needs to go in heritage and specimen, be repeated again.
So you're establishing a protected tree section and what you have to do with them if there's an issue. And within that definition, there's specimen trees and heritage trees. Wasn't there also something else? There's a third definition that kind of fell into that. City tree? Okay. So then that's the formatting issue that has to be addressed, is we're entering another section of the document. But there's no transition at this point. It looks as if it's a continuation of definitions, and it's not.
Do you think if we, on page 12, the heading basically says 9 protected trees, if we change the heading to basically say what it means, it's not only protected trees, we are application of something, it's something different.
Yeah,
Are you saying instead of a 9, it needs to be like
new
a
category.
Roman numeral
Yeah.
2?
Article 1 starts here, and the definitions aren't part of Article 1. You just move because this is really when you're getting into the meat of the ordinance.
Yep.
So you just go through the intent and all of the title, intent, and the definitions, and then,
But the numbering is consistent throughout. There's not a differentiation.
maybe we should have 4 articles. Article 1 for the beginning, this begins Article 2, and then so on. It does bother me. I'm a writer kind of person, so it does
Yeah.
bother me that there's not a clear break there.
That would make this much
So it's more of a
manageable.
formatting question and how to, so we can look at,
What is the
So this
break?
whole first section could be Article 1,
Yeah,
to Melissa's point.
and then we'll go, once we start going into the protective and specimen, it becomes Article 2. Article 2 becomes 3. And we'll have 4 articles, but it's not getting any more.
Actually, we do have an Article 1. Article 1 is in general.
yeah, that's
Right,
the,
that's what I'm saying.
that's what
That
she's
would
saying, leave that
stay
as
that.
Article 1, and
Yeah.
then maybe make this a Article 2.
This is Article 2.
Article 2 begins at section 9.
Article introduction definitions.
Yeah.
Article 2, yeah.
Okay, that fixes that.
Hopefully.
9.1 still goes away, 9.
Well, it would still be 9, right? We would still leave the 9 there. We would just put another header
Yes,
of
Article
articles.
1, Article 2 fits in between the two
Okay,
as the break.
right,
Yeah, and I think we should give it a title.
like
So-
administration, yeah, we'll have to look
Administration
at
of
that.
something, yeah.
Administration of protected trees.
Or just, well, but then we get into the specimen and heritage, so
All right.
we'll look at that and try to figure out we'll look at that.
Or should Article 2 just start sooner?
Well,
All right.
let's find
No,
out.
you're right after definitions. It's okay, I'll let you
Yeah,
guys
I mean, I
figure
think
it
there's
out.
definitely some reorganization that will probably need to happen at some point, because
Yeah, maybe in
I don't like the way there's sections in here that really kind of apply to both Article 2 and 3, but it's only listed under Article 3, and so I want to move some of that stuff into maybe like a new like maybe in this Article 2 where it kind of applies to both of them. So, but first I wanted to make sure we had the wording
Yeah, maybe
that
in
we
the
wanted,
interest
and then we
of
can
time.
work on the organization of
Let's
it.
focus on this, if
Of
you
the
agree,
content.
if you agree. First focus on the content, and then once we have a cleaner version, we can say whether it flows well or not.
Because we might end up going backwards.
And I'm
having to
glad
do
we
that.
clarified that, because that will make that easier for you. We might have been removing things that might have otherwise not, we wouldn't have been driven to remove them, understanding that we're now in a different section.
Yes, yes.
I understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay?
So we'll go back and we'll capitalize, we'll add Milton's, we'll do all of that. We'll just focus tonight on the actual content here that we have highlighted, and then we can go back later when we get the final version and make sure we've capitalized everything, all these little
Okay,
structure things are cleaned up.
great.
Okay, so the next highlighted section?
Specimen trees. Okay, so I know there was concern with the stakeholder committee changing the size of specimen trees. So what I went back and did was changed it, as you'll see highlighted, that hardwood and softwood trees, except for pines, will have a minimum DBH of 24 inches, is on page 13, apologize. For large or medium height class trees, and then small height class trees stay the same at 8 inches, and then pine trees will have the minimum DBH of 27 inches.
Okay.
So in A, it says pine species, and then in C, it says pine trees, and then it says whatever pinus.
Oh, okay, yeah, we can change that.
And then
So the second, the C becomes species?
Yeah.
Species,
what's Pinus, SPP?
Well, SPP is like the abbreviation for species,
It would
for the
cover-
Latin,
It would cover all the different species of pines.
yeah. Because see, Pinus is the, I know you guys probably don't care.
Yeah, you got it, okay.
It's the Latin name.
Latin
yeah.
name, okay.
Genus and species is what we go by. So that's just to clarify for all the botanical nerds that we're talking about everything in this specific genus. By adding the SPP, that just means all species under this genus,
Got it, okay.
basically. It's just an abbreviation.
Okay, and then in 10.1, if you could just add a colon, I would suggest at the end
10.1.
Yeah.
for size, colon, and then here's the,
Oh, okay.
requirements
Gotcha.
for criteria.
Dang, Fred, he's taking your job tonight.
hey,
Attention to detail.
we way ahead of me, way ahead.
And then I guess back to definitions again, I don't know, do we have it anywhere defined where what's considered large or medium height class or very wide or wide?
That's on the tree species list. So the tree species list does divide them out by large and medium height class and the very wide and wide canopy and narrow, very narrow.
So then should we?
So we need to reference the chart.
Reference the tree species list there, yeah. Or what, the exact name or whatever it's gonna be called, City of Milton Tree Species List, or if you need to make a definition for City of Milton Tree Species List, I think we say tree
Thought we
species.
did have a definition for that, didn't we?
I think we say tree species list.
So, okay, well, was everybody good with the sizes on the specimen tree?
I was taking it for granted that we've already addressed that in the chart, and you're just using the chart that we addressed last time. Is that the correct assumption?
The,
Remember we were adjusting the numbers as to what everything was?
the chart in the original ordinance, is that what we're talking about, the tree
Yeah.
density
The charts,
ordinance?
did the chart survive?
The table?
Yeah, the table?
Yeah, it's still there.
Okay. So
Tree species.
I'm assuming you were just referring to the table when you made those references.
Wait, I think you're talking about two different tables.
Okay,
I
well,
was referring to the table on the tree species list. When I refer to the height class, is that what you mean? Yes.
okay. So that's not really up for debate, is it? Because it's already been defined?
Right. Are you talking about the height class or the size, the DBH?
Size.
Some of these tables.
And you're talking about, so at one point you're saying 0 to 24 inches, right? And the next, no, I'm sorry. Yeah, you're saying, except for pines, a medium DBH of 24 inches. Then you're going to pine trees with a minimum DBH of 27 inches.
Yeah,
So there's a dip-
regardless of height class, maybe it would clarify that.
Yeah.
We added that language.
Oh, okay. Now I follow you. So-
So how did you word it, Melissa?
Pine trees with a minimum DBH of 27 inches regardless of height class.
Yeah, okay.
So is it just called height class in the tree species list?
In the manual on table C, it defines,
No, it's on the tree species list. So yes, on the tree species list, it has a mature tree height class and a mature tree canopy size. And that's where the small, medium, large, and the narrow and very narrow come into play.
yeah, and that's also here.
Oh, okay.
It's also table C.
So it's actually called mature height class, or?
So there's a mature height
Yeah.
class and then the average height. So the mature height class is large, medium, or small, and then that's defined by an average height range. So where large is 50 feet or more, medium is 25 to 50.
No, I'm just saying. the
So
cro-
he's saying we should throw in the word mature. if
Yeah,
that's
the
what-
cross-reference
how it's
exactly how it
Yeah.
is in the
Okay.
manual.
Consistent.
Yeah.
So we're inserting mature between large or medium,
Mature height class.
mature height class?
Okay, so any other questions about size? Okay, so the next section is the page 14, 10.3, where we had added the replacement may be waived, and we decided to delete that since we already had the waivers section. Any questions about that?
Does the other waiver include the reference to if the site exceeds the minimum tree canopy requirements? Did we capture that language? So
Well, I mean, the waiver language is just if you want a waiver from the ordinance, you just, you just say what you want a waiver from. It didn't
Right.
really
This is
specify.
a tighter waiver. This is saying it's only can be waived if the site exceeds the minimum tree canopy requirements.
Because this is a specimen tree.
Yeah.
Yeah, but, I mean, we just removed it altogether because they can apply for a waiver for any requirement of the ordinance.
And we didn't want to give them more incentive to waive specimen tree requirements. We didn't want to draw attention to that there either.
So that could be in their written request, when we say, how does the approval of this waiver meet the purpose and intent? That's when they can say, well, my property exceeds the minimum canopy coverage. So, yeah, so that would be up for the applicant to kind of
Yeah, okay.
push that, I think.
I subscribe to that.
Okay,
It should say 150% of the square feet
Of the tree canopy
of
cover,
the,
and then another
Spell
the
the percent out and then.
Okay.
tree canopy cover removed.
do we,
We'll catch all of that.
Yeah, we can work on that.
Thank you.
Tree canopy cover, okay.
10.4, 25%, we have already done this, right?
no, so the next one is 10.4 on page 14. So there was discussion before about, it was 10% before, and we increased it to 25%, and that was to provide more incentive to save the specimen trees. So I think our discussion last week, we kind of came to an agreement with leaving it 25, so it's been left at 25.
Yep.
Okay. And then moving on to heritage trees. So on page 15, you had questions about the definitions of the healthy tree being removed, or the list for A through E being removed under 10.6.
Yep.
And I explained that it had been covered under a healthy tree, and I think we were okay with that now. So I left it the same.
Okay. You guys okay with it?
So it says, city arborist or an ISA certified arborist.
Yeah, and we can change that to match the verbiage on the other page.
And then what about,
What does it end up,
Because remember on the other page, let's see, where was that, where we said, so as determined, or as documented by a ISA certified and
Yeah.
final approval by the city arborist,
yep.
and then what about, is
on page 12.
tree
Sorry.
group
I'm sorry?
defined, or is tree group defined, or what's considered a tree group?
Where are you seeing tree root?
It says for a tree or tree group.
Oh, tree group.
Oh, group, yes, that was defined at some point.
Hmm.
I thought.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we deleted the tree group. But, well, right here,
On page 15, right, 10.6?
Oh, that was not a definition, it was a section.
It's not in there.
So we can take tree group out of 11.5.
It's an 11.6 as well.
Okay.
Or we're just taking it out.
Or a tree to be designated.
We'll do a control F for all tree groups.
Yes. So, again, just, if we're gonna say that it's gonna be a, final approval by the city arborist, then we need to, you may also need to change a little bit at the end of that 11.5,
Right.
as the city arborist will determine by,
Yeah. we'll
the
clean
following
up.
criteria, something
Okay.
like that. Yeah.
Strange punctuation at the end of that too. We'll get all that.
okay, then continuing on with heritage trees on page 16. We added back 11.3,
Yep, thank you.
the GIS.
Yep.
Sorry, that IH. And then we looked at the recompense for heritage trees, because you had mentioned concern about the 150% not being enough. So we upped that to 200% and then added payment must be made into the tree canopy fund as per the rate listed in the fee schedule based on the actual measurement of the tree canopy.
Okay.
So they will not only have to do double recompense or plant back double what they remove, they will have to pay at the, and that rate is, just FYI, $31.25 per every 100 square feet.
31.
And that's the standard rate? What's that set by?
That was set by our old tree ordinance was $500 a tree.
Yeah, because I think we
So
have to
if
have
you
it somewhere
do
else,
the
but we
square
gotta have it in
footage,
garnish and such.
Canopy related.
translation for canopy to DVH, it came out to 31.25. Now, Sandra wasn't here then, and I don't know if that $500 is still current, those numbers might need to be looked at again.
Well, the fee schedule, again, is separate from the ordinance, so that's something that can be amended regularly, so,
Be consistent, that's all what this is, right?
yeah.
But we're still basing it on the $500 a tree, so maybe we should just check and make sure that's a good average price.
Well, in the case of the heritage tree, we want to make sure it's painful. You've heard me say that before. And I know you guys always caution us saying there's a maximum allowed by the state, I think.
Well, that's for fines, that's different,
Okay.
that's a
So by
citation.
recompense, is it not in the way this is described, we have to also pay into the fund? Is that not considered
That's a fee,
that's a fee?
yeah.
Ah, okay, I love that.
Yeah.
On a heritage tree, that just went from $31.25 up to $500.
Exactly.
Right, whatever. I mean, I'm being facetious with the 500, but
Yeah.
Yeah, and it could be more, because I threw in there the actual measurement of the tree canopy. So 1,600 is what's listed in here as the average size of a large, very wide canopy tree. On the species list, that's the assigned canopy value. But some trees may actually be bigger than that. They're going to be like 2,000. I've even seen trees that are 3,000 square feet in area for their canopy coverage. So that's why I threw in the actual measurement and not the assigned.
right.
So that way, if you do have that significant big tree, it is going to cost more than 500.
It's
So
making it a
it's,
$1,000 tree, right?
It's $31.25 per canopy square
Per
foot.
100 square feet.
Take 500 divided by 1,600.
Well, I was going to do, if it's a 3,000 square foot canopy, you divide that by, what were you saying, Melissa?
Right, do you want to divide it by 31.25 to see what that would equal? I'm sorry, I'm not.
So you would take the, so if you had a 1,600 square square foot canopy tree, you would be basically paying 160 times 31.25, and that should come out around 500, right?
That's 31.25, no.
Do that math for me, tell me the math again.
That's
1,600 square foot, and you're saying per 100 square feet.
Yeah,
So if it's a 3,000, and it's per 100, that's 30, right? Times 31.25. That's not enough.
And 31.25 is the dollars?
Yeah.
It's 500 divided by 1,600 square feet. So you're getting
what, 500, I don't know.
$500 divided by how many square feet of the tree, the credit you get tells you how much you're paying for.
That's 0.3125, not 31.25.
I don't know. I used to know this.
Yeah, we are doing something wrong.
Yeah.
So if you're taking, let's do easier math. So if you're saying it's a 3,000 square foot canopy, 3,000 square foot canopy, and you're saying it's per 100 square feet is the rate?
It's
Right.
31.25 per 100 square
The
feet.
first figure out.
That's where the decimal
Okay,
gets
so per
moved.
100, so it's 31.25 times 100 of that. So if it's a 3,000 square foot tree, that's only times 30.
It's,
No, it's times 300.
it's 1,600 divided by
3,000?
500 times 100 for the square feet.
Sorry.
That's the key, is times the 100 square feet. We didn't do it per square foot, that's why I got the .32.
Okay, so
If you multiply that .32 times 100, then you get the full 5 per square.
tell me one more time. So tell me how big is the tree, the canopy?
Try it one more time, before I tell you. Okay, so 500 is the value of the tree.
Why is that?
Well, that's what we had it set before, and I'm trying to back into that 3125.
So you're saying that the 500 is the value of a
standard
heritage tree?
1,600
A
square
standard
foot tree.
1,600 square foot tree,
Okay,
an average tree.
okay.
So 500 divided by 1,600 times 100,
100,
because it's per 100 square feet.
right?
That's where the number comes from, 3125.
Okay,
Or you can do that backwards.
yeah. So it's $500, you said?
Yes.
So if it was, I'm gonna do the reverse math on that. So if it's 1,600 square foot canopy, you divide that by 100, that's 16 times
500.
31.25. Whoops. That's 500. So we're getting the math the same way.
We're going, yeah.
We're just
You're
going to
checking it
reverse
differently.
tracking on it.
Yeah.
So in that example, if it's a 3,000 square foot canopy of a heritage tree, and you divide that by 100, because it's how many hundreds of that equals 30 times 31.25.
937.
Yeah, they're not getting that. It's weighted, it's based on an average tree.
Right, so that's only saying you're paying $937 to take down a heritage tree.
Well, what,
That's
but we're making you,
It's a cheap takedown of a heritage tree.
but we're making you replace a 200, so now a $500 tree just became a $1,000 tree. Because we're making you replace it 200%, twice as much, because it's a heritage.
Yeah, so it's 3,000 becomes 6,000.
So the 937 becomes $1,800. That's still a cheap takedown on a heritage tree.
No, I'm saying it becomes a $1,000 tree. It doubles the price. of it.
Because of the price of paying.
No, but you're doing
to-
1,600.
You're doing a 1,600, I'm doing a 3,000
Oh,
canopy.
right.
I'm saying a 3,000 square foot canopy tree, which is majestic. That's a 200-year-old tree.
And you pay $2,000.
And I'm saying it's only going to cost you $1,800 to lose that tree. That's not enough. I think it should be
10 grand.
5 times that, 10 times that, yeah.
So let's say 3,000 square foot, right? As per our calculation, it becomes $1,800. So we want it to how much? Let's say 5,000, 8,000?
But what does that fee schedule say?
Yeah,
Is
the
it,
fee schedule says, that's what I'm saying, the fee schedule doesn't account for 3,200 square foot trees, it only accounts for 1,600, but
No,
we're.
no, 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 no. The fee schedule says 31.25
Right.
per 100 square feet.
Exactly.
So
Right.
it doesn't matter how many square feet it is.
Right.
Right.
So
And
it
that's
can be a
okay.
3,000
Yeah,
square
but I'm
foot.
saying we're not gonna raise the fee because it's a heritage tree, that 31 whatever is gonna stay.
Right, but we're saying, consider raising the rate.
Yeah, so I think you would make it like 500%. Not raise the rate, you would make the replacement requirement 500%.
We're,
Rather than
it's the
200.
same as you and I just did on the math. How we get there is immaterial, as long as it becomes a significant decision for the individual trying to take down.
Right, but she
a,
raised 150 to 200, but I think what we're getting at is we didn't raise it enough.
Right,
So instead of complicating it, adding another fee or any
Well,
of
the
that.
200 is for the replanting. 200% of the canopy
Which
is,
translates to fund if you can't.
well,
well, don't you have to do both? You have to replant at 200%.
yeah, but I'm saying replant 200% and pay at the rate of 31.25 per 100 square feet. So you'd have to pay replacement I mean, that's just a cost that they would have that we wouldn't see necessarily,
Right.
except in the tree replacement. But then the payment would go into the tree fund.
I think it's more important to raise the percentage because remember, we don't want the money, we want the trees.
Right, so I'm just gonna go there next. I think it should be both. I think they should have to.
It
do
is both.
A significant, well, it
He
is
wants to
both,
raise
but it's
it.
not, it's
Oh.
not both at the right rate, is what I'm saying. I think Melissa and I we're getting closer to each other on this one, and that is that it should be for a heritage tree, a significantly higher percentage of replacement, replanting, and it should be a significantly higher rate
Okay.
for the cost.
So what
So
if
you've
we-
got a double whammy if you're gonna take out a heritage tree.
The fee that's been charged.
So,
So double the fee and raise the percentage?
well, I think it's even more than double the fee. I think it's 5 or 10 times the fee. And it's no less than double the replanting. It's maybe triple or quadruple the planting for a heritage tree.
Dial it up.
Really dial it up on heritage trees.
Yeah, but you're exponentially dialing it up because you're dialing it up on the percentage of replacement required and the fee.
Yep. I'm doing that on purpose.
Well, just tell us what you think the value of a heritage tree should be, and then we can back into what those percentages would yield.
Well, I think you're on the right track with a significantly higher percentage replanting. And maybe it's not 200%. Maybe it's 400%.
Yeah, so let's start by 400 something, right?
And let's just put 400 as a placeholder
Yeah.
right now. And then let's talk about what's the value of a heritage tree. I think it should be, to Ron's point, to me.
I started, the opening bid was $10,000.
I didn't know we were at an auction.
Well, you're 15.
We have to base it on some facts, that we can't just pull numbers out of the air. I don't think we can have an arbitrary number that one person would say it's worth 10 grand, someone else will say it's worth 20. I think we need some sort of standard to follow.
We cannot do that appraised value thing, right?
Well, what was the standard employed previously with the
Well,
31
it was
and a
canopy,
quarter?
which is fine. So in that case, we just need to do the canopy where it's remarkable that they have to think about it. Because if it's a heritage tree, and they're saying, and we just use 3,000 square feet as the example, it could be a heritage tree and it's only, to your point earlier, 1,600
Yeah.
square foot.
500 came from, back then, the average price to purchase a 4-inch tree.
Yeah,
That's cheap.
That's where that came from.
that's a,
2 inches were 250, 4 inches were 500.
And how long ago was that?
I don't know, it was like that when I came, so. I don't know when that was set. I know Markwell came up with it, could have been when he began here or later in his.
so we can
tenure.
say it's probably dated enough that the cost of
That's
the
why
tree's
I,
gone up.
yeah, that's why I suggested looking into that number.
Well, the cost of the tree varies a lot on the species and the
Right.
availability.
It really is.
So that's going to fluctuate. It's going to be hard to narrow that down.
I mean, even
But
then,
remember,
we knew,
and the recompense doesn't necessarily require that it be, or does it, the larger caliber tree? And could we do that? where a recompense on a heritage tree requires a minimum caliper of replacement of X in that 200% or 400% replacement value, and there's a heavy dollar value as well.
Okay, let us do some research on this. I
Yeah,
made a
let's
note,
work on some
increase the percentage, increase the fee, do some research on the current value of the trees, and we'll also look into maybe looking at these appraised values for these larger trees, so we can come up, just to set the value of a heritage,
Yeah.
a very large tree, because we know how, we can look at nursery stock and determine the cost of a tree you can purchase, but you can't purchase a
Right.
heritage-sized tree.
Right,
So
right.
we're gonna
It's a
have to
project.
find a way to put a dollar amount on that.
Right.
How often
And
do
then-
we designate a heritage tree? What's considered a heritage tree?
sorry?
How often do we designate what's considered a heritage tree?
We never
Well,
have.
currently there are none.
Well, I can give you some ones to start with, and it's the 5 or 6 mega oaks that are at the intersection of Freemanville and Birmingham, where the city just bought the property kitty corner from that. Those, by the grace of the developer today, have been saved so far. Some of them are in decline, but it's only because they've never been, per Mark's words at the time, they've never been cared for a long time. It's not that they're dying, it's that they haven't been properly maintained, they haven't been nurtured. So they, in some ways, have an appearance of decline, but it's not. It's that they need to prune the dead branches and give the rest of the tree a chance to flourish. So last thing I want to, that's our landmark there. It's a remarkable corner because of those oaks that are there. There used to be a remarkable oak at the intersection of Doris and Birmingham Highway that, whatever reason, that came down. It was run into a bunch of times, it was damaged, there were 2 or 3 of them, and then I think we're putting in a turn lane and we needed the benefit of the wider right-of-way there. So those were lost. That was a city decision, not a private individual decision. It was in the right-of-way. So there are heritage trees around town for sure. We can, driving around, you can find them.
Yeah.
We just haven't designated them.
Yeah, we're not saying there aren't any, we're just saying no.
Well, there's
There are
none
none on
documented
record.
on the
I'd be
list.
willing to bet probably on the Freemanville development that's taking place right now. I bet there were some heritage trees in the mix of that. That was a equestrian estate that's been around for 30-plus years. So, right now, they're getting the benefit of being ahead of the game on this. And it's so far been a pretty respectful, engagement of the property. They've kept a lot of the trees. They've kept the sense of the pasture there. I hope they're going to develop on the other side of the tree line that was there. That was the perimeter of the first pasture. And, you preserved what was the view shed right there. Even though it was on the other side of the pasture, it's a part of the look and feel of that particular development. If they're smart, they'll keep that and do a lot of their development on the other side of that. But I'm sure in the mix of that, there were some heritage trees. So I think, Melissa, that'd be great. If you guys are willing to do that with the frame of mind that we've just suggested, that it needs to be remarkable for a heritage tree to be taken down.
Okay.
We will base it on something, right? As you were saying, you
Yeah.
can just pull them.
We'll increase the percentage, we'll increase the fee, but we'll also assign an amount to the value to a
Yeah.
heritage tree and a regular tree, and we'll base those percentages and increases on those
And,
amounts.
and when you ground it that way, it's going to hold up more from a legal standpoint too. Okay. I'm
But
totally on board.
when is the plan to actually record any heritage trees in our system?
So someone needs to nominate one. And it has to meet the criteria.
Yeah, and when I was reading, it was the owner that could nominate it. Is that right?
Only the.
I think the owner can, but I also
Just the
think,
owner or the arborist.
or the
Or
arborist
the city
can,
arborist?
can you
If
tell
someone wanted to let
from,
us know, and if we weren't aware of it, you could let the arborist know, we could consider it.
Well, yeah.
I think
I mean,
Sandra's
it
got
also has to meet, the criteria too.
Right, so champion tree, documented 75 years old, that's a tough one.
yeah, well, Caliber can help you
So,
with that.
I mean, and I'm familiar with the state and county champion tree list, and currently there are not many listed in Metro Atlanta, and there's none listed in Milton. So there are no state or county champion trees. And so, yeah, the other stuff is, and there's no landmark or historic trees listed on the Georgia Tree Council website either in Milton.
So it really leaves us to familiar feature or historic significance. I think you're thinking of a heritage tree as a really big tree.
Yeah, it's not really based just on size.
Right.
But getting to the replacement, so if you go under tree canopy replacement and page 29 of the red line, you will see in 23.3, replacement trees shall be a minimum 2-inch caliper for non-specimen and non-heritage protected trees and 4-inch caliper for specimen or heritage trees. So there's your answer about the caliper requirement. Okay, so we'll look at the,
Yeah, we will do some more research on this, right?
So, I mean, is that like a goal or a plan or short-term goal to actually solicit from the community? Or, because if we're gonna go through all this and have these ramifications, but then we don't even have any heritage trees.
Right, I mean, I think as part of our education program, when we roll out the tree ordinance, we'll define what a protected tree, specimen, and a heritage tree is, and that'll help, and we can always put stuff
I mean,
on
you'll
our
have, so
website.
you're saying you would have the list of
Yeah,
what's
we would have,
designated?
we would define what it is, educate the public on what they are, and the process.
Maybe
for-
some examples of Hollywood.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and solicit, then potentially solicit from the public. Hey, we're taking an opportunity now that we've got this ordinance and this manual in place. If you guys have any trees that you would like to be seen as,
Probably have
considered a
something
heritage.
on our new beautiful website they're creating, nominate a heritage tree, here's the criteria.
So, but it's but it could be the other way around, right? If the requirements are so, what should I say, strong,
Yeah, people may be disincentivized.
yeah, then I'm like, okay, then you are sort of disincentivizing the people to nominate a tree.
I don't know if
About
it's,
the balance of that, but
Yeah, anyway.
Sandra, I have a question for you with regard to the 4-inch caliper designation for that replacement part. Is that kind of an industry standard? So think about a 4-inch caliper tree. That probably, is that a 15-foot tree, depending upon the species? Is
well,
it
the caliper is measured 6 inches above the ground at the
Mm-hmm.
nursery. So caliper is used for nursery stock.
Yep,
And, well, I know evergreens, they tend to go by height, but hardwoods, they typically go by caliper.
right. Well, let me.
So no, it's totally, the 4-inch is totally based on the caliper. So depending on the species, what the height could be, because some shoot up faster than others.
The reason I'm asking that is there a point of diminishing return when you suggest a larger caliper tree? Because it's going to be less or more sensitive to the ability to relocate it. If it's even been raised in a nursery and it's an 8-inch caliper tree, there's a point of diminishing return as to whether it's even economically feasible to relocate that tree and have a chance of success for it surviving, right?
Yeah, 4 inches is usually about the biggest I want to go, because once you go over 4 inches, you do decrease that chance of survivability because it goes into what we call transplant shock.
Yeah.
Because anytime you do, because most people don't have the reason, because you would have to dig a really big root ball
Yeah, you
to
can
get
get
enough
big root
roots, and it's hard. The
I've
bigger the
seen
root
those
ball, the
great
harder it
big
is to
machines
manage and
that come in.
transport.
Yeah.
And then you have to worry about, you have to cut off a significant amount of roots
Yeah.
to get the root ball. So then when you transplant it, it's usually in such shock from losing all that root system that the tree just sits there and doesn't grow at all for like 4 years.
Okay.
But you plant a 4-inch tree in 4 years, it'll probably be close to 8 inches. So you're better off.
Yeah. Okay.
There's
The reason I was asking that is I wondered if there was an equation to suggest in the replacement of heritage trees that maybe a larger caliper tree made sense, but you just gave me a good reason why not to go there.
Yeah, I mean, it is done from time to time,
You
but
can keep an eye on
that's
the
with-
oak tree at the corner of the green right
Yeah,
over
that
here.
orchid
It was
did.
an 8-inch, it has not, it's been planted maybe a year or two, and I don't think it's
Struggling.
comfortable yet.
Yeah. Mhm. Okay.
Just a couple more points, I guess. Renumbering, just making sure, because 11.6 was page 15, and then it starts at 11.1 on page 16. And then,
Say that again?
so renumbering, so it should be, I think, 11.7, 11.8, 11.9, 10.
Okay, yeah, we can look at all
Oh,
the
yeah.
formatting. the
And then
punctuation.
11.2 and 11.3, so do you think we should potentially combine those? Because obviously the city arborist is gonna maintain the list as recorded on the city's GIS system. And how else are they gonna?
Yeah,
maintain
you
the
could
list?
combine them.
Right, okay. And maybe define what GIS is. And then for 11.4,
We're going to have a lot of definitions.
I know. Fee schedule, or, even even here, you could just say the city's whatever GIS stands for, parentheses GIS.
Yeah, that's, I know.
Yeah, and then fee schedule, is that also gonna be defined somewhere in 11.4,
The fee schedule, like I said, that's,
or cross-reference?
It needs to be pointed out where it is in the document.
Yeah.
yeah, the fee schedule is separate. And I think it's kept in the city code, like all the fees are together, right?
Appendix.
Yeah, but we can mention, we can, as you're saying, cross-reference it.
Cross-reference.
Where it is.
Yeah.
Actual- Yeah, and, specifically, list what it's called.
Okay. Anything else for heritage trees?
Nope.
Okay, so moving on with the recommendation list at the bottom of page 3 was the city tree management was removed. We discussed the last work session of why it was removed, because we had the city trees are protected under section 9, page 12, and
But we added the definition of city trees. because
and
that
we
was
added
being
the
discussed,
definition
what
of
is
city trees. So it was already kind of covered, and the city doesn't need to state that. And then the hazard tree section going on page 4 of the recommendation list at the top, section 13, hazardous trees. So we discussed that at the last work session too, about how hazardous trees threatening public property are already covered in the city code, and trees threatening private property is a civil issue between neighbors. So I left all that stuff deleted. Is
Okay.
everybody still okay with that?
Yeah, I
Okay.
think your early adjustment to the what constitutes those things and the rights that we have covers all that.
Okay, just wanted to make sure. Okay, so then, section 14 variances was removed.
Yep.
We discussed the last work session because we have the waivers and the appeals. So we left that as is. And then we get into section 16, the city arborist inspections, which is on page 19 and 20. So this too was something that we discussed at the last work session, and I think we had the understanding of, we already have the inspections kind of called out in other sections, and that's why there were certain things removed from the inspection list that were basically just defining the job of the arborist.
In 14.1, again, you got designee or city arborist, you got to just adjust.
Straight there.
Yeah, we'll catch all this.
And the same thing, keep going down into 14.2,
Yeah.
et cetera.
Yeah, we noticed that after this was sent out, so
Yep.
it's hard to catch all those.
We just need to do a control F and do it. We can do
So,
it manually.
one comment was on section 14.2, page 19. So what if the actual person, refuses, the city's entry? Then what?
Well, then I would think it becomes a police matter.
Oh, no
Then-
person shall refuse entry or access to.
Yeah, so you're saying if somebody refused entry, then I think you would call police backup. That's the
Yeah.
way I've kind of handled it in the
Same
past.
thing, yeah.
Okay.
It's enforcement issue.
Yeah, whenever we're out doing inspections and field work and stuff, and things get a little heated or whatever, we can always call the police for backup if we need to.
Good.
And is that, again, we've got designees, so
Yeah.
typically, who is it that's going to be going out?
Yeah, well, the designee, yeah, that would just have to,
Administrator, right?
we would say administrator.
Okay.
Just to be
And,
uniform.
yeah, to cover,
The whole spectrum of people.
Yeah, okay.
like he did today.
Okay.
Okay. So then I think the next item on there is notice of violation. On page 21. I mean, nothing was really changed in this. This was something that we discussed the last time.
18.3, right? We are talking about, yeah.
So, yeah, so 15.3 then, do we have, notice of violation defined? No, we have a section, but same thing for, all those listed in 15.3, stop work order. I know we have sections for
Well,
that.
I mean, they're defined in the city ordinance.
Yeah.
And then, when we go to the unified code, they'll kind of combine all the definitions in one section. Am I correct on that?
Yes, yeah.
So at some point, all definitions are going to be put together. So
Okay,
notice of violation, stop work order, and all that stuff is kind of covered under the city code.
okay.
But after this tree preservation ordinance, I get a bit nervous in bringing the UDC in front of the. So after the tree preservation ordinance review,
Yeah.
I get a bit nervous of restarting the UDC. Like, okay,
Yeah, oh, wait, just wait.
let's first finish this and then start.
That one's 400 pages.
Yeah, no, those are 900 something, 987 pages.
It's
980, literally it's a whole
a
stack.
dictionary.
And everyone says if you will send it to legal, it will be much more expensive for legal review than it took us to write this. Literally 1,000 pages of document.
Good evening reading.
Yeah, we'll have to bring our jam.
Say, we'll get back to you next year. We'll read it, we'll get back to you next year.
Like where to start?
Yeah, I don't know.
And then comprehensive land use plan.
Yeah, that has to start
Yeah.
very soon.
Oh, boy. Okay.
Okay, so were there any other questions about the stop work order section? Or fines and penalties, citations? There was
That
the,
stop work order can just be posted anywhere on the site?
No, then we have it should be
Yeah.
visible from we have those different things.
Yeah, is there any other language to use to?
yeah, and we've kind of been talking about enforcement
Well,
lately.
In C, it does say it has to be given to them.
Yeah, so it's an A, it says be posted on site.
Posted on site, but it also has to be given. Is it a separate document? You've got a posting that says there's stop work order? And is there also an actual document that's handed to the person responsible?
Well, normally the stop work order is the sign that's posted on the site.
It says
So-
you can't do any more work.
Right. But we've been talking about enforcement lately and staff meetings with enforcement all around the city, not just the tree ordinance, but erosion control and everything and code enforcement. So we've been talking about how it should be given in writing and posted on the site, because if you post it on the site and somebody removes it, then but whenever I post it on the site, I always take a picture of it to prove that I posted it. So somebody can't say I never saw it or wasn't there. But I mean, you are going to have vandalism. You are going to have, kids riding their bikes down the street that go, hey, what's this? I just want to yank it off. So I think we'll
So I
look
think
at
the
that.
legal requirement is, if it goes to the court or something, the legal requirement is it has to be posted, but it has to be delivered to the property owner. So that's the reason why the code enforcement officers, they always say, we can post something, but for legally liable reasons, you have to mail it to them, and then they look at the addresses and if everything goes in place. So post and mail, and you have to give it.
Yeah, so I'm gonna look at that, make sure it's consistent with what all the other
Yeah.
divisions are doing, and look at it that way, because I haven't seen a written stop work order that you had, because the other thing is you have to make sure you have duplicate, because you have to keep one for yourself and give one to the, so that may be some forms that we create here soon, that, so we can have a written and a posted one, so.
Yeah, and if we're adopting this, we have to have that in
Yeah,
place.
yeah.
And
Yeah, well, I was gonna look to see what it had in other sections of the, of city code. And see, but I mean, I think we'll have to change that back to, instead of posted on site, be in writing and then, and posted on
And,
site.
yeah.
Yeah, I think we'll have to have it both in there.
We will make sure it's consistent with the way how we do other things also, right?
Yeah,
If you just said, shall be posted on site and state specific violations and be given to the applicant, property owner, et cetera, you've accomplished what you were after.
oh, okay, yeah, see what you're saying.
Yeah, but what's also considered given to the applicant, so if they're not there, is considered,
You could say
certified mail to the
via-
applicant, is
yeah.
that considered given to them or what, all that needs to be figured out and put in here.
I know, enforcement, unfortunately, is an ongoing thing. We're always working on that and trying to figure out better ways.
Oh, we have one per,
Okay, so,
I don't think we ever done. We have one person to enforce everything we're doing. In everything.
Well, actually, the shall colon implies and, by the way, these are listed because they're colons or semicolons.
Semicolons, yeah.
Semicolons.
You have to meet all of the.
It's
Yeah, you
implied.
gotta meet all the requirements, but
We just
making,
need to add.
we need to make sure
Yeah.
what's
need
the
to add
specific
mail.
requirement for
Okay.
posting and delivery.
Mail to applicants.
well, yeah, you can also hand it, to them, like you hand them a citation. Okay. Melissa's moving on. Okay, so a lot of the other things were discussed at the last work session, and I think we were in agreement with all those. So then moving on to, where did you say, Melissa?
Page 35.
All right, Melissa's going to page 35.
I'm focusing on the highlighted sheet. Because we discussed these, if it's not highlighted, we didn't change it since our
Right.
last discussion.
Okay,
I think your red lines, in most cases, where the red line is the addition, it's consistent with the things that we agreed to last time.
Yes,
I didn't
the
find any,
highlights.
I haven't written any notes on these suggesting otherwise. So I mean, we can be efficient by saying, this is what we discussed, and not have to go back and review each one.
The yellow
But-
ones are-
And there's no news, you wouldn't have struck something either without highlighting it.
Right.
So we're okay looking at this point just for
Okay.
highlights. And I think we're there, are we not? There wasn't anything deep. Oh, yes, there is.
So, only thing I had was, 22.6,
what page is that? Sorry.
page 25.
Right there.
So must,
Way
it
back.
says the canopy replacement required, the property owner must provide an agreement to, what kind of an agreement, what are we talking about here?
22.6?
Yeah.
Well, then I say such as, but not limited to, landscape plan, signed contract with a landscape company, or a written agreement stating the quantity, size, and species.
But a written agreement with who?
Well, that's what I need to, yeah, I meant to clarify that, to say a written agreement to the mitigation. It's not really an agreement between people, it's an agreement to the recompense, the tree replacement. Does that make sense?
But it's an agreement between the property owner and the city?
Well, no, it's an agreement of the property owner to replant the trees. They're saying, I agree to the replanting that you required, and here's what I'm gonna plant back.
And where do they say that they agree? How do they say that?
It's really a part of their application.
Yeah, it can just be, well, they could do a written statement in an email or a letter, and I've also thought about creating a form. Because the reason why I added this stuff in before was because this is what I'm kind of dealing with now is when tree removal permits were issued to homeowners and they were told, you know, oh, well, if you remove this tree, it's going to bring you below your canopy requirement, so you have to plant back this amount of square feet. And you have a year to do it. Well, then we go back a year later and we say, can you give us an update? What was planted? Can you provide photos of what was planted, or can you, and people go, I didn't know how to replant a tree. Well, but that was part of your permit, and it was on the permit, and we email them and tell them that this is the requirement of the permit. But then people go, I didn't know I had to replant a tree. So I'm kind of dealing with that now, so that's why I kind of thought, well, maybe if I get something up front that's saying, yes, I am aware that if I get this permit, I have a year to replant this requirement. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, that would be my
But
suggestion, somehow with the permitting, or this is the requirements, and you list it out, and they've either signed off on it.
Well, see, and what they've been doing before I got here was sending an email saying, here, your permit is approved on the following conditions, and you have to replant X number of square feet within a year. So, but then we go back, but now I'm following up with these people a year later. I'm going through these stack of permits and following up with these people, and I'm getting half of them go, I don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
Well, sure.
So then does it have a ramification if you don't meet those conditions?
Well, we try to work with them. At this point, I'm trying to work with them because I wasn't really involved with the tree removal permit a year ago. So I'm trying to be nice and work with them.
Well, you should be, because most of them just blow it off and go on. So I think we should work as best you can with it.
Right. I
Can
mean,
you give us an example of what's an example of what you've accommodated to?
well, so then I'll ask them, well, can you replant? When can you replant? You know, I'm willing to extend your
Period of time for?
your date of replacement requirement. You know, I'm willing to extend that, you know, or I'll look at it and or some people, you know, will kind of push back on the number they were given. And so I'll look at it and see if it was a reasonable number or not, and if it needs to be recalculated. So I do work with the people on that, and I'll be like, hey, you know, I'm willing to extend it, because especially now when you're checking back on these people in the summer and you know they can't replant now anyway because it's the middle of summer. You don't want them to. I'm like, hey, I'm willing to extend
Couldn't
it.
dig the ground.
Right, it's so dry out, nobody could. So, you know, I'm like, hey, I'm willing to extend it into the planting season, you know, and most people will be like, oh, okay. I mean, you know, just, you're like, I'm doing you a favor, extending your deadline, you know, they think it's great. So a lot of people have been
You know
receptive to that.
They are just thinking that she will just go away. Or at least for
Yeah,
6
that's what I was
months.
gonna say, is that.
Yeah,
is
well,
the
they don't know
timeline
that I
too long
write it
as well?
down. I write
1
down
year
when
too
the
long.
extension was, and I'm like, we're gonna send you another email when this deadline comes up again. But, yeah, that's kind of how we've been handling it now, is just give them courtesy notice. Because tell the people once the trees have been planted, they need to notify us that they've, you know, fulfilled their requirement. And a lot of people
When I
do.
was managing it, I was
How
getting
many
lots of
did you say
emails
you
of
had?
planted trees.
How many did you say you have
How many do I have?
Those instances?
that have,
Like the stack that you're gonna
Stack.
follow up with next
that
year.
you got?
Oh,
Number early
yeah,
on.
I don't know.
What
It's-
tree number are we on?
No, but I think that speaks well that many people followed the rules.
No, they're saying they didn't follow the rules.
It's the same.
No, they had a permit. They were
follow the
told
rules.
that,
To take it down,
yeah, not to
not
replace
to
it.
the recompense.
Right,
They got what they wanted. They got to take their tree down.
yeah,
But they were like, heck with you after that.
Right. you're-
yeah.
You're not gonna follow up?
So the next time you follow up with them and they haven't planted it, What sort of teeth do you have to get them to plant it or find them or whatever?
Yeah, we'll have to look at that. I
Yep.
haven't gotten that far yet, so, because most people have extended deadlines into the planting season.
But I think we could apply the.
Yeah, I was gonna say, do we need to make sure that we have something for you in here?
Yeah, she
Yeah,
might be
or
Yeah.
we,
$1,000 per tree per violation or whatever, I mean.
oh, that's the citation.
Yeah, couldn't we move to that? Issuing a citation?
It's the same issue in our building permits thing. It's like people get a permit to install HVAC system or something, but after that they need to get a final inspection done. Someone comes in, they install the HVAC system, and here you are, the property owner pays the amount and they move on. But they never call our building division to get a final inspection done.
Well, they will on those if they want their CO, so there's a good checkpoint for those.
No, but again, it's not a CO thing, right? I think it's sort of a general
Oh, if all they're doing is replacing.
replacement of HVAC system or something.
What I've done on like plats, because people have to record their plats after they're approved, there's no incentive for them to bring it back to us after they've recorded. I don't want to go and pull everyone from Fulton County, I want them to bring them to us. So what we do is we keep a list of those, and anytime those people come back for anything, we don't give them anything. No
Yeah.
improvements can be done on your property until you give us your plat. Now, I can still go get it and get the copy, but I still try to enforce that.
Yeah.
Well, that's,
It's a thought.
you know, this is a discussion for another day, and something I look forward to revisiting with you guys, and that is, when does a conceptual plan become an adopted plan? And we know we've had some debates over the last couple of years about when one becomes another, and the dispute that happens when somebody figured they had a final approval and they really didn't, and their requirement to adhere to what was considered by the city a final plan, or their inability to move forward because it wasn't considered a final plan by the city. We've got to, I think we have to have some clearer,
We may have remedied that by now, we'll talk about that.
maybe, and maybe you have and just haven't brought it back to us for the
I
update.
haven't. I
And all
don't
it
know.
may require is an update, so we can have a comfort with that.
We'll talk about that.
So
Great.
let's stay here.
Sorry.
Okay, so you'll work on 22.6.
Okay.
Yep.
So the next highlighted section is the tree canopy cover requirements, page 35.
Yep.
So I just had a quick comment, 22.10 and 22.11. It references section 25, but I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
I'm
if-
struck.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's the right. You need to change that cross-reference, I think.
Okay.
It was 22 point,
22.10 and 22.11.
Oh, yeah, the table of contents isn't updated.
Yeah,
There's a lot of those.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was hard to go through and change that stuff when I didn't know if things were gonna move around again.
You only know how many times we reformatted this. If we kept up with all of that every time, it would not be an efficient use of our time.
Yeah, okay.
okay.
Okay, so 27.2 on page 35. So I added some, because we had the discussion, I know there was concern about clear cutting, and we talked about how we could kind of stop people from clear cutting. So the thing that we added in here was canopy coverage shall be met with existing trees to remain on site or a combination of existing trees and newly planted trees. Do not give you an option of using only planted trees.
Yeah.
Existing trees must make up at least 1/3 of the required canopy. So we're trying to get them to not clear cut and keep trees. And the 1/3 came from because that was kind of the alternative compliance we have the option of 1/3 into the fund and 2/3. So we thought we would stick with that 1/3 kind of consistency.
Maybe we should think of adding it there, because now we're saying 1/3 has to be saved. The other 2/3 could either be planted or that could be split in half and tree funded.
Well, this goes back to the point that I think I wanted to revisit earlier, where the tree envelope versus the tree save area versus the construction zone. This kind of plays into all of those again.
I think where I'm coming together with you is that even if we're saving 1/3, where are those third gonna be? One thing that Mark Law was passionate about that he kind of convinced me of is keeping the buffers between the homes so that people can have their privacy. So if there's no incentive to protect the trees along the property lines, who knows where that third would be? That's my issue, my only issue. That's I think, one benefit over the construction zone, because it would only have limited it to where you were developing. Everywhere else would have had to have been safe. The construction zone and the improved area, it didn't allow enough flexibility for a case-by-case basis. I just don't think the 15, 30-foot offset works for every situation. We've got septic systems and all kinds of other things. We found with our stakeholders, it just really wasn't working. We applied it to many scenarios.
Well, not so much the septic as stormwater.
Utilities, gas lines, all kinds of things came into play that were not contemplated.
Yeah, and I know one of the big discussions we had when we introduced the idea originally was driveways and turnarounds and pools and those kinds of things. And I get that. I don't think we're going to solve that tonight. I think we should all think about that between now and the time we have next month.
Okay.
But I would just ask that maybe we think outside the box and have it maybe read something to the effect of the lesser of, and it shall be, and you list a couple of criteria. If it's not going to be 1/3, it's the lesser of that, or a defined construction area by linear feet or by square footage or something to that effect. And then you also then find a way to incorporate what you were just suggesting, Melissa, where you also get some sort of benefit if you're going to preserve a view shed or a protected visibility to one neighbor or another. And I'm willing to invest some time in that to work. Maybe you and I should just meet and talk about that so we can weave our ideas together on that, because I think I probably carry the most passion on that in particular for the table on this side. And I'm happy to work with you on that.
I'm okay with doing away with the construction zone now that we have the critical root zones, because they can't say they're saving it if they're encroaching in that anymore. It's the improved area that we're losing that ability to create some tree save around the perimeter of the lots.
Yeah, it's good. And this goes back to a debate that I had with council several years ago when the council makeup was a little bit different. And I felt like what they were awarding to the development community on the allowable development area was too much on any given acre. Because if you think about all the things that we're slamming in, and you guys, I know I'm a broken record on this, but bear with me just one more time. And that is, if you're going to put a house with a 3-car garage or a 2-car garage and a separate additional 2-car garage and a pool and a cabana house and a tennis court, all of a sudden you've got 10 pounds of stuff on a 5-pound lot. And the sticking point for me is we get to a point and you say there's a diminishing return that you can't possibly save enough trees, and yet they're allowed to do that stuff. So my pitch is you can't do all that stuff if you want to buy a 1-acre lot. You may have to buy 1.5 acres or buy 2 acres to do that. And that takes care of that concentration of too much stuff on too small of a lot.
Well, I think that is covered in zoning with lot coverage requirements.
It is, and it's a lot coverage requirement that I'm speaking to. I just forgot the nomenclature for that.
Yeah.
So it's a lot coverage requirements, I think, are too liberal on what you can do that minimizes the tree save. And it generates impervious surface, meaning roofs and rooftops and concrete surfaces around the pools. And I think we made a mistake a number of years ago on that. And I think it's worthy of some reconsideration at some point.
Yeah, I just don't think it's right to use the tree ordinance to
Yeah, I
push
think some of
those
that needs to be
items,
handled.
though.
Okay.
It should stay in
All right.
zoning.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is a tree ordinance related issue of creating buffers and preserving those view sheds between the neighbors. That belongs in the tree ordinance.
Okay. Let's find a way to marry those, although keeping them separate.
Okay.
Great. So I'll commit to you time between now and the next meeting.
9 a.m. tomorrow.
Pardon?
9 a.m. tomorrow.
Well, yeah. That's my plate for tomorrow, but okay, soon. Okay,
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so then looking at the table 1, we kept the AG one at the 57%. We had that discussion last work session. I looked at the C1, C2 stuff closely with Robin, and of course she's not here.
That's the reason why you're using her
Yeah,
name.
that's why she ran out of here, right?
she knew this was coming.
So she was saying that the zoning of the T4s was very similar to C1, C2 as far as like what was allowed for lot coverage and use and that kind of thing. So she suggested following the 30% that was in the T4s to keep it consistent at 30%. So we did increase it from the 20% that was there before and to 30%, just to try to keep it
So
consistent.
to think about where we have C1 left in the city. Not much. We have some T4 stuff because of form-based code. And so I know we shouldn't legislate to lot specific or,
You could apply it. I think applying scenarios is valuable to make sure it works.
so you've got, let's think of, there's a C1 at New Providence and Freemanville, adjacent to the Union. It'll never get developed. It's 100% tree stand today. It'll probably always remain that. You got some C1 at the Birmingham Crossroads. It's what was the Rajanti property. It's now it was owned by the developer that did Walgreens and whatever. That's like barely an acre. And if we hold to the other restrictions that are also on that property for what it can't be, and you hold it accountable to a 30% tree, we're probably okay there for getting something that's appropriate and not a true C1 use. Then it's the rest of the C1. I know there was some C1 that the city buy it that was at Hopewell and.
We need Robin here.
Okay, well, so the good news is most of those are already kind of either restricted up to the point it's going to be hard to develop them as a true C1 because they are also all the ones I just described for you are in heavy AG1 areas. They're just little carve-outs that were C1. Contemplated by Fulton County, we ended up getting the zoning for those from Fulton County. So it's probably really Deerfield that's left. Deerfield, Highway 9, and Windward areas that are the true C1s that are left. Oh, and probably some Arnold Mill.
Yeah.
But we have the form-based code along Highway 9 too, so.
Yeah, so we're probably okay with some of that stuff. So, okay, so I just talked myself into basically 30% is probably not unreasonable for what we've just measured, because what's not C1 is going to probably be form-based code, or if it's Arnold Mill, at some point we will end up doing a master plan for it, and we'll contemplate those things when we do that.
Yeah, I don't want to put words in Robin's mouth, but I feel like I remember her saying there were only 3 properties that this would apply to, and you named 2 of them, and I'm not sure what the third was.
There's one on Arnold Mill.
Arnold Mill and Cox or something like that.
Yeah, I think those would literally be the only 3, so that Arnold Mill and Cox, I think, would be the only one that would actually realistically.
Okay,
apply
so
to.
we're probably okay. And that's actually a heavily wooded area right now anyway. So, all right. Well, maybe not, but probably. I think it's where the old driving range was. So it's got some trees, but open.
So the next thing was on page 36 at the bottom, 27.4. We basically put it back the way it was. Tree canopy cover shall apply to both the entire development and each lot for subdivision.
This was the conversation
Yeah.
between Steve and you, right? So this again went back here.
I finally won a battle.
Yeah, You think you could have been here tonight to defend that, or?
He's in New York, right? He's out of
Yeah.
town.
Yeah,
Timed it perfectly.
clearly with us in mind. Okay,
So the next big thing is kind of a combination of page 37 and 38, that whole A through Q under 27.5. So this is where we basically went through and decided what was going to be kept here in the ordinance and what was going to be put in the tree manual. So I tried to outline it there in the green. So basically everything that was be put back in, I undeleted and highlighted for you. And then most of the other stuff I listed as being incorporated into the manual.
This is what we discussed last time, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so did y'all have a chance to kind of look through that and,
So page 39 also, right? Yeah.
oh yeah, and it carries on to page 39, sorry.
On 39, why is that italicized D?
The commercial and non-residential?
Yeah.
I don't know, that's how it was done, so I left it, but I mean.
It's a formatting issue, yeah.
yeah, just need to format.
Formatting issue.
Okay.
Yeah, I noticed, Connie liked to
Yeah,
use
it's a formatting
italics.
issue.
Yeah.
I found, there was a lot of italics I took out already.
There's more in there too, I didn't even say it.
I know.
I think when she wants to specify something, then
Yeah, I don't know why
It's
she
like-
liked to do italics.
It's appropriate for genus and species names, but that's
Yeah.
the only application
Yeah.
I've seen.
Right.
Okay.
Okay.
So is everybody good with the A through Q?
Mhm.
Then the next thing is really just the parking lot section on page 41 and 42. So I did incorporate back the no parking space shall be greater than 60 feet. I basically combined the old D and E.
D and E,
Or D and G,
D
sorry.
and G, yeah,
See, I've been doing this too much.
Yeah,
yeah.
I read that, and I don't remember why that makes sense.
What,
Why is it not greater than 60 feet from the
Yeah.
trunk of a tree?
Well, the only thing I could figure, spaces are about 10 feet wide, right? So it's the same as every 6 spaces or 60 feet is the
Oh.
way that's why I put them together, because to me, they were kind of saying the same thing.
Okay,
I thought we were gonna do one or the other, but I guess we can do both.
Yeah, well, I just put them together.
So the zoning ordinance requires a parking island every 6 spaces.
well, the reason it's both is because one, you could then, if you didn't have the second part of it where no, shall not be greater than 60 feet, now I remember why we did that. Is because you could then say, well, I did 2 trees here, and that should satisfy me for 12 parking spaces. And we're saying in this case, no parking space shall be greater than 60 feet from the trunk of a tree. That accommodates your 1 per every 6 and not doing 2 and getting credit for 12 spaces.
good
So that's
point.
why you need both.
Good point.
Okay, then F was added back in on 42, page 42. And I think that was pretty much it.
For F, do we need to have any other definition or something that what's considered open soil surface or rooting areas?
I thought open soil surfaces.
Yeah, open soil surface, I believe, is covered in the conservation.
I think it's in the manual, but I don't think rooting area. I don't remember that being
In the manual, but not in the ordinance.
right.
Does it need to be in the ordinance if we're stating it here?
Yeah, it's in the ordinance. It should be. I don't know what rooting area is.
Thank you.
Kind of saying the
You
same
don't know.
I can speculate, but
What are we? What's the
Well,
general?
we could probably get rid of the rooting area, because I think she was trying to say the same thing as open soil surface, is just where the roots can go. So think you could almost get rid of that and just have the open, we could define open soil surface. I think there is a definition for it somewhere I've seen. It might be in the conservation manual. Maybe I'm just thinking of my industry standards.
That was it. Let's get another question. Well, you've got some,
I mean,
some
well,
cleanup stuff.
I made it, yeah, well, Article 3, page 30, where it just says developable property. I don't know if we want to say what's considered that, or anybody could ever push back on that and say, hey, this is an
Well-
undevelopable property.
Yeah, that has been, I never liked that word either.
Yeah.
That was something that someone had come up with before I got here. So, and there were some certain people that really liked it, so I kind of left it. At one point, I tried to change it, and I got some pushback, so I changed it back. But I always kind of like the, tree removal associated with development, and tree removal not associated with development is kind of how I like it.
But I guess what's considered development,
Some of this is
Developable.
defined. So develop.
Well, developable, yes, that too. But in general, just to make sure that there's no,
Well, developed property is defined and undeveloped property. So if we leave just those two terms and define them clearly so that the developed property, it specifies that it's something that can be, it says improvements currently exist. This is for tree removal permits, but under the,
The definitions.
yeah,
Oh.
and under the undeveloped property, it specifies that it can be Because I
So,
thought
yeah,
once-
basically, I think we should change it back to undeveloped, because we don't really define developable.
But the
But we
point
do have a
Or-
definition already
the
for
distinction has
undeveloped.
to be made where if you're redeveloping. So
Well,
say it's already developed, but you're
undeveloped-
doing further development.
right.
Undeveloped does include redevelopment.
I thought it did, but as I started to read the definition, it's not
It
there.
doesn't? I thought it did.
I thought it did too, that's why I said I've lost it.
Well, or find a way to say, whether it's developable or undeveloped, that these priorities find a way to merge those two and say that the priority needs to be the same. It's the preservation, and it's kind of in this hierarchy of preservation. So maybe you find a way to combine those two and just talk about it being a general preservation.
Well,
Or you
you're
don't
talking
just-
about the priority areas?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think the priority areas are different. That's saying the priority areas on a property where you want tree conservation and planting to occur are the rural view shed, the road frontages. So that's different than your undeveloped property. Priority areas are within a undeveloped property. Gosh, now I can't get them straight.
I know.
Yeah.
It's developed, undeveloped.
All right, so we'll count on you guys sort of revisiting that, see who's going to give you the pushback, and,
Right?
And then you push back.
I didn't say any names.
no, you didn't. Tell Steve that,
And then 26.4, tree survey, should that also have a definition? Tree canopy plan shall include a tree survey. I don't know if that's standard, or what's it considered a tree survey?
Yeah, I think that's pretty standard, but, I'm around this stuff all the time, so it makes
Yeah.
perfect sense to me.
Right.
I don't know what you guys are talking about.
okay. I think that
Look
was
at
it.
26.4, yeah.
Did you have another one, Smeet? Anything else?
No.
Okay. All right, so my takeaways are, first of all, thank you for really great work on this again. And this is hard work, and you guys have done a great job of making this as easy as possible for us. It's arduous, but it's not as hard as it could be. We didn't have the kind of work you guys put into it, so thank you for that. Second, obviously, we've crushed your ability to go forward for October.
So I will not be so ambitious from now on. I will not be so optimistic.
Well, if we're just doing these in work sessions, then we don't have to wait a month.
Yeah.
And
If you guys are willing to do a special call work session.
Do the second half of the next meeting.
yeah, and you guys figure out what makes sense, and what's the advertising requirement on a work session versus a regular meeting?
I'll have to go with Rob.
That's
Yeah, we
Rob will have
can-
to tell us that.
So let us start working on this feedback which we received. Once we are at a critical point, then we can see when we can schedule the work session again, right?
Yeah, that'd be great. I think we should do that.
Yeah.
Consider another meeting.
Special
Just
meeting.
have it a straight up
Yes.
work session. So that's the second takeaway from this. Or that's the third one, I guess, because the second one was crushing Parag. Third one is maybe look at another work session. Fourth is not related to this. This is just a topic that we probably need. This came up Monday night of this week. It looks like we are in for the need to, this is not a tree ordinance related issue. We're gonna have to look at the sound ordinance and figure out constant versus peak versus maximum.
Yes.
Sounds like that's some work that probably should come to the planning commission for that. I think we should sign up to do that work. I think that'd be, would fall on our shoulders, and happy to do that. Last thing just is the reference you guys made earlier to code enforcement. And this is sort of, I will say this is not intended to be self-serving, because in the political race that I'm a part of, both candidates are being as compliant as can be with the sign ordinance, but there are some other races that are out there that have signs that are currently in violation of our code ordinance.
Okay.
I would love to see those
Well,
sign size appropriate.
That
I
makes
don't
sense.
care that they're there, it just needs to be sign size appropriate.
I thank you for.
And it's one candidate in particular running at a higher level seat than, it's not city.
Sure, thank you.
And I'm not, not name names, but
Sure.
if you guys would address that. The candidate's been warned by the community, and she hasn't chosen to abide.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Nice job.
Thank you. Great job.